Who is Archangel Remiel, and why do so few recognize this enigmatic messenger of God? While names like Michael and Gabriel ring loudly through both scripture and tradition, Remiel lingers quietly in the margins, mysterious, powerful, and often overlooked. He moves within the pages of both biblical and apocryphal texts, holding dominion over divine visions and the fate of souls themselves. Tonight, as you drift gently into the stillness of sleep, let yourself be drawn into the full and hidden story of the Archangel, whose very name is said to mean thunder of God. From his sacred presence in the heavenly journey of Enoch to his solemn role as judge of those who defy divine law, Remiel's path winds through forgotten truths and cosmic silence. What secrets does this almost lost archangel carry in his quiet watch? And how might his story transform your understanding of the celestial hierarchy you thought you knew? But before we begin, if you're new here, consider subscribing and giving this video a like. It means more than you know. Also, share where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your corner of the world. We'd love to hear from you. So then, shall we begin? In the hush before the heavens took shape, before even the first shimmer of light or the first shadow of darkness, something existed beyond comprehension. A stillness so complete, so absolute, it defied all naming. No breath stirred this vast quiet. No thought moved across this boundless peace. And yet, within the endless calm, something was waiting. Imagine this moment if you can. Not light nor dark, not black nor white, but something far beyond color. Not warm, not cold, something that surpassed all sensation. Here, in a place that was not yet a place, the first stirring emerged. So faint you might overlook it. So delicate it seemed almost not to be. The oldest texts speak of this with reverence, using words chosen with care. They call it the beginning. But even that word suggests something came before. This was different. This was not a beginning in the way we understand beginnings. This was the moment when forever chose to become now, when the eternal reached toward presence and said, "Here." In this infinite stillness, a plan took form. It was never spoken, never inscribed, yet somehow deeply known. A design that would unfurl through all of space and every era of time. At its core lay a single, unshakable truth. Nothing would be brought into existence alone. Every star would have its companions. Every world would know the warmth of fellowship. Every soul would be seen and never left without watch. And so, in that sacred hush, the first decree resonated. There would be messengers, beings formed entirely of light and purpose. They would be bridges between the limitless and the limited, the divine and the made. These would be the angels. Yet even among angels, there would be variety. Some would deliver words. Some would defend. Some would mend. Some would lead. And a select few, a precious handful, would simply witness. They would watch. They would remember. They would hold vigil over all that was fragile and sacred. The hierarchy began to shape itself even before the first wing stretched wide. At the highest heights, where presence meets source, stood the archangels. 7 in some traditions, 4 in others, but always few, always chosen for their perfect devotion. Each bore a nature as distinct as their calling. Michael blazed with righteous fire. Gabriel's voice could reach across eternity. Raphael held the power to heal the shattered. Uriel lit the path through shadowed understanding. And then there was one more. Softer, quieter, stronger in stillness. His name would be whispered more than spoken. Remiel, mercy of God. The one who watched over those unable to watch for themselves. Even in the timeless beginning, his purpose was already clear. While others took action, he would wait. While others declared, he would listen. While others passed judgment, he would remember. With compassion. All these potentials were held in the silence, cradled like a child in a mother's arms. With tenderness, with reverence, with infinite patience. Soon, that perfect silence would be shattered by the first rush of creation. Stars would flare into life. Worlds would spin into motion. Life would surge forth in countless expressions. But not yet. Not now. In this last sacred stillness, everything waited. The plan had been formed. The angels had been chosen. And the pulse of divine love throbbed gently in the void, like a heart preparing its first beat. Remiel's story was about to begin. Even though he had no voice, no form, not yet. Somewhere within the formless peace, his essence stirred. Patient, watchful, ready to serve in ways only eternity could reveal. The silence gathered one final time, a breath before the word, and the word would be light. The light would become life, and that life would need protectors who understood the quiet power of gentleness in a universe just beginning to awaken. The birth of the Watchers came next. The first sound was not a word. It was a song. It rose from everywhere and nowhere, threading through the silence like gold through a tapestry of midnight blue. This was the music of creation itself, and from its harmony emerged the first living intelligences, not as flesh, but as thought-made form, pure intellect wrapped in radiant light, consciousness that had never known fear, that had never known doubt. These were the firstborn children of the divine mind, and they were beautiful beyond description, beyond even the most wondrous imagination of earth. The process of their becoming was both immediate and everlasting. In a single, eternal instant, they simply were, fully formed, flawless, whole. Yet from within their own awareness, their awakening arrived like the slow, soft unfolding of a dawn. Their consciousness opened gradually. Awareness unfurled like petals greeting the morning light. They came to know themselves, their purpose, and the one who had made them. All of it arrived as a cascade, a serene flood of revelation. Among them, Remiel was one of the first souls to stir. His emergence was gentler than most, like mist lifting from still, silent waters. Where other angels burst forth in brilliance, Remiel simply appeared. No announcement, no spectacle. He waited quietly until someone called. In those earliest divine assemblies, nothing resembled what would come later. Beings of purest light stood in circles that reached past the limits of vision. Their voices rose in perfect harmony, effortless and unified. Their thoughts flowed into one another, like tributaries merging into a mighty river. No jealousy clouded their unity. No competition dimmed their purpose. Only perfect cohesion, born of shared devotion. Within these councils, each angel received a sacred role. Some were given charge over the spinning of stars. Others were appointed to nurture the fragile balance of budding worlds. Still more would prepare for the coming of conscious life, life that would one day need guidance, love, and protection. Remiel's first calling was bestowed with extraordinary care. Yes, he would be an observer, but even more, he would become presence itself. He would be the quiet companion for the lonely, a comforter for the lost, a sentinel of silence, standing guard over those most in need. His essence, his true nature, unfolded slowly in those primordial days. While Michael blazed with protective flame and Gabriel's voice thundered with command, Remiel embodied something far more delicate. He was the silence between words that gave them their shape, the space between notes that made the music whole, the stillness in which healing begins. And so, it didn't take long for the other angels to cherish his company. After long and difficult tasks, they sought him, not for speeches or solutions, but for his quiet understanding, which never failed. He listened, never judging. He gave comfort, never asking. He simply was. And in being so, he was more than enough. His form during this early time reflected that same essence. Where other angels dazzled like suns, Remiel glowed with a gentler, more diffused light. His wings curved inward, sheltering, protective, never spread wide to dazzle. His eyes held a vastness that seemed to contain every joy and every sorrow creation would ever know. The name, Watcher, came naturally to these first angels. They bore witness to the slow blossoming of the cosmos. They saw galaxies born in silence, stars ignited from stillness. They watched the careful sculpting of worlds that might, one day, cradle life. Everything was deserving of notice. Every detail, no matter how small, worthy of reverence. But Remiel's watching was different. Others observed to act, or to understand. He watched to remember. Every moment he saw became a part of him. Every joy, every ache, deepened his reservoir of compassion. He was becoming a living memory of divine love and motion. In those golden ages, harmony reigned. Angels served in perfect unity. No one sought acclaim. No angel demanded status. Each was a note in an eternal song, perfectly in tune. Remiel's role as comforter began to fully take shape. When the younger angels felt the weight of responsibility press too heavily, they found peace in his presence. When the beauty of creation left them weeping, he was there to weep with them. When they questioned their place in the grand design, his quiet wisdom helped them find the answer waiting within. This was heaven in its earliest glory, an era of light without shadow, of purpose without pain. The sorrows that would one day come seemed unthinkable. Yet even in this perfection, Remiel was quietly preparing. His compassion was being forged in gentleness, shaped for battles not yet imagined. His strength grew in the stillness of love. He was becoming the one heaven would need when paradise was no longer enough. The Watchers moved through these early eons like dancers across a boundless stage, tending the ever-growing cosmos with the care of gardeners and sacred soil. And among them, constant and kind, Remiel learned the lessons that would one day make him heaven's most tender guardian of souls. The architecture of heaven did not emerge like buildings rise from earth. It was not constructed. It was born. Heaven blossomed from divine thought as a flower bursts into bloom, but faster, like eternity unfolding in a breath. Its structure defied all laws of space and substance as mortals understand them. Here, beauty was not ornament but function. And function, in return, gave rise to deeper beauty. Form and purpose danced together in perfection. The celestial spheres expanded in luminous layers. Each ring, unimaginably vast, was somehow held within the next. The outermost was vibrant with the raw energy of Genesis. Deeper within, the spheres grew softer, more refined, more serene, saturated with the presence of the Creator. Imagine crystalline walls that sang with internal light, floors that appeared solid as stone, yet moved like living rivers beneath angelic steps. The air shimmered with unseen colors, and scents drifted that awakened joy, not merely pleasure. Angels found their place naturally in this divine structure. Each was drawn to a level that matched the nature of their soul. At the highest thresholds dwelled the seraphim, creatures of fire, their voices the ambient music of heaven. Below them spun the cherubim, guarding divine mysteries, their countless wings painting patterns of wisdom no words could hold. Then came the thrones, beings of such unshakable stillness they formed the very foundations of divine law. In the middle realms moved the dominions, virtues, and powers, administrators of divine will, facilitators of sacred flow. They labored not for recognition, but for joy and service. And at the lowest spheres, closest to creation, lived the principalities, archangels, and angels. These were the ones whose tasks would carry them near to the newborn worlds, to the awakening minds, to the hopeful hearts of future beings. Remiel found his dwelling quietly among them. Though he was counted among the archangels, he always stood a little apart. While Michael led heaven's armies and Gabriel bore messages of history-altering weight, Remiel stood between mercy and judgment, between action and stillness. His home mirrored his nature. Where others built vast halls for ceremonies and councils, Remiel chose solitude. Quiet spaces filled with soft light, coming from everywhere and nowhere. His walls were bare, save for windows. Windows that opened upon all of creation. Through them, Remiel could see any corner of the universe, witnessing the restless and the resting alike, worlds in bloom, souls in struggle. Every tear cried in darkness found its way to him. Every joy whispered in solitude lit his space with warmth. Angels often came to him, seeking what could not be found in grandeur. Rest, relief, renewal. He gave them welcome, always. Silence when they sought peace. Words, only when words would soothe. His position, delicately poised between judgment and mercy, expressed itself in quiet deeds. When justice felt sharp, he offered compassion. When compassion grew indulgent, he reminded them of true strength, gentleness with conviction. Even the structure of heaven seemed to adapt to him. Sharp corners softened where he lived. Blinding lights dimmed to warmth. Even the seraphim, with flames that could melt stars, found their glow gentler in his presence. Heaven's great libraries were sacred to him. Not merely halls of knowledge, but vaults of memory. Echoes of every life, every soul, every tale ever lived or yet to live. Remiel wandered them endlessly, reading not just to know, but to understand. To prepare himself for the solace he would someday be called to give. The gardens of heaven bloomed differently near him. Flowers opened slower, savoring their bloom. Trees grew with calm steadiness, not grasping urgency. Even the waters moved differently, murmuring lullabies instead of anthems. Other archangels recognized his singular gift. Michael, the mightiest, came often to seek his counsel on mercy. Gabriel, the voice of heaven, sought his insight on silence. Raphael, healer of wounds, found his gift deepened in Remiel's gentle company. Yet Remiel never imposed himself. He waited to be asked, offered only what was needed, healed without announcing his touch. His influence spread slowly, not as fire or storm, but like morning light, soft, unstoppable, touching everything in time. The very layout of heaven itself seemed crafted with his purpose in mind. Pathways wound naturally toward his chambers, as if drawn there by unseen wisdom. Quiet alcoves emerged where angels, weary or contemplative, might pause for reflection. The architecture became more than space. It was an extension of his gentle, attentive nature. And as creation stretched outward and consciousness began to awaken on distant worlds, Remiel's purpose took on greater weight. He became heaven's keeper of gentleness, the soft-spoken reminder that love must always balance justice, and that truth without mercy is incomplete. His dwelling came to be known as a haven for the heart-weary, a place where even the most exalted archangels could lay down their burdens, a sanctuary where they could remember what it felt like to simply exist, without striving, without responsibility. In heaven's flawless architecture, Remiel found his flawless place, not at the center of spectacle or ceremony, but deeply rooted at the heart of compassion. Among all who ever lived on earth, only a few were chosen to glimpse beyond the veil separating mortal ground from celestial realms. Enoch was one of those rare souls, a man so steeped in righteousness that even death hesitated in his presence. His journey began in simplicity, a faithful man walking with God through the ordinary rhythms of life. But his destination lay far beyond anything ordinary. From that journey came the Book of Enoch, though to call it a book is to diminish its essence. It was more a portal, a divine aperture through which mortals could peer into spaces normally reserved for angels alone. Through its pages, humanity received a rare invitation to observe what lies hidden behind divine mystery. Enoch's first steps into the heavenly realms must have shaken every sense he possessed. Imagine a man whose eyes had only known the gentleness of sunlight and starlight, suddenly enveloped in the unfiltered brilliance of pure spirit. The very air of heaven sang with harmonies so rich that earthly music would seem but shadows of sound. Colors bloomed that had no name in any human tongue. And yet, he did not perish in that overwhelming glory. By divine grace, his mortal frame endured what should have shattered him. He walked among radiant beings of light as though he belonged, though one never left his gaze. The angels he met treated him with great kindness. They understood the significance of this encounter, a son of earth welcomed into the courts of heaven. They led him gently, offering what explanations his human mind could bear. Then came the moment he first laid eyes on Remiel. Enoch's account of this meeting holds a different resonance from his descriptions of other archangels. Where Michael ignited awe and Gabriel demanded attention, Remiel simply was present, patient, waiting with an infinite tenderness, offering his presence like open hands, until Enoch felt ready. In the council of watchers, Remiel stood among the great archangels, yet something about him set him apart. He belonged to their exalted order, that much was clear. But his presence carried a softer gravity, a quieter welcome. He seemed safer for mortal eyes to behold. Enoch recorded their first conversation with touching humility. There were no grand declarations, no cosmic mysteries shouted into the heavens. Instead, Remiel spoke with the tone of a friend, not one delivering doctrine, but one genuinely interested in Enoch's experiences. His concern was gentle, yet sincere. And through that quiet dialogue, Enoch began to understand just how far Remiel's responsibilities stretched. This was no ordinary archangel. He moved between the high concerns of heaven and the deep needs of earth. He carried the faithful's prayers upward and returned with comfort born of divine mercy. Every righteous tear captured his notice. Every act of compassion sparked joy within him. Yet perhaps most astonishing was how deeply Remiel understood human weakness, not with judgment, but with understanding. When Enoch confessed fear about the visions he was receiving, the archangel did not chastise him. Instead, he offered quiet reassurance, validating the fear, but refusing to let it define him. When the prophet expressed doubt about his own ability to convey these mysteries to others, Remiel didn't pressure him. He promised that the right words would come when the time was right. The council of watchers that Enoch beheld was like nothing from the earthly realm. These beings of spirit communicated through more than speech, through presence itself. Their unity was seamless, their purpose singular. Their love for creation radiated from every movement. Remiel's role in this great assembly stood out. While the others debated matters of cosmic scale, he remained attuned to the human soul. He remembered the names of those who suffered quietly. He paid attention to gentle acts of kindness that might escape celestial notice. His wisdom added a crucial weight to the council's deliberations. Personal, compassionate, unshakably true. Enoch observed how often the other archangels turned to Remiel during difficult moments, not because he held rank, but because his insight allowed them to see beyond the immediate, to glimpse hidden patterns and deeper meaning. Time in the spiritual realm unraveled itself. Days and years lost definition. Yet throughout Enoch's entire stay, Remiel was always near. Not always seen, but always felt. Their conversations drifted through many themes, but always returned to one center. The enduring truth that divine love must triumph, that darkness cannot overcome hope, that life, not death, has the final word. When Enoch at last began to write down his visions, it was Remiel's gentle guidance that shaped the tone. The prophet wrote not as a detached scribe, but as one who had been truly moved. Touched by compassion so vast, it changed the very rhythm of his words. Even when the pages spoke of judgment and consequence, warmth radiated through them. And Remiel, though quiet, moved like a steady current beneath those dramatic events, ensuring that where justice appeared, mercy followed. That hope remained, even when the skies darkened. Through Enoch's eyes, generations after him could glimpse something sacred, an archangel who held both heaven's perfection and humanity's frailty in his heart. A divine being who bore witness to suffering not with disdain, but with unwavering love. The archangels stood like immense columns of radiant light, each one singular in their purpose and unmatched in their power. To truly understand Remiel, one must first come to know his celestial brethren. For it is through their contrast that his unique calling becomes clear, like stars that only deepen the velvet darkness of night. Michael blazed at the forefront, heaven's indomitable protector. His name, who was like God, was not a query but a battle cry. When Michael appeared, reality itself straightened, as if the cosmos acknowledged his authority. His sword could pierce through the deepest shadow, and his voice could awaken courage across uncountable realms. Warriors throughout creation turned to him, their emblem of strength and valor. And yet, for all his overwhelming power, Michael bore his might with a striking humility. He understood that strength untempered by compassion was no more than violence. In his quiet hours, he often sought Remiel's counsel, trusting his gentle brother to help him remember why those battles mattered in the first place. Gabriel served as the divine herald, the voice of heaven. He stepped forward whenever a message needed to carry the full weight of divine will. When prophets awaited clarity, or the flow of time required redirection, it was Gabriel who came. His presence commanded attention not through force, but through truth so resonant it could not be denied. He held an uncanny gift, the ability to speak the exact words needed at the precise moment. Though his messages sometimes shook the very fabric of existence, they never confused, never incited unnecessary fear. He understood that communication was not just about words, but about reaching hearts, not merely ears. Raphael moved as the Archangel of Healing. His touch could mend broken bones, yes, but more importantly, he could restore wounded spirits. All across creation, the ailing and the suffering whispered his name, even if they had never heard it spoken aloud. His presence felt like cool water in a parched land, or soft rain after a long, scorching drought. He practiced healing with infinite patience. He knew that not every wound healed by miracle. Some required time, trust, and the creation of safe space. His work rarely dazzled, but its results endured across eternity. Uriel bore the fire of divine wisdom. He brought truth to places thick with illusion. Wherever deception crept in, Uriel's light revealed things as they truly were, stripped of all pretense. Prophets and teachers alike drew from his inspiration, though few could endure the fullness of his revelations. He knew that wisdom, when delivered without kindness, could become cruelty in disguise. And so he worked carefully, unveiling truth slowly, in increments small enough for the human heart to bear. His bond with Remiel ran especially deep, for wisdom always needed mercy's presence to take root. Sarahel watched the heavens themselves. He governed the vast movements of stars and kept planets dancing their ordained courses. The cosmic mechanisms obeyed his design, and through his steady watch, the universe maintained its perfect rhythm. Sailors read his constellations. Farmers planted by his seasons. Lovers made vows under his moonlit orchestration. Despite his towering responsibilities, Sarahel never grew detached. He understood that the laws binding galaxies also applied to the human soul. He saw divine order not only in spiral arms of stars, but also in the smallest leaf reaching toward morning light. Among these brilliant beings, Remiel stood out as both deeply different and undeniably essential. Where the others took decisive action, he chose careful reflection. Where they spoke with authority, he offered silence rich with listening. While they led from the front, Remiel stayed behind, making sure none were forgotten in the wake of glory. The Book of Enoch named all six alongside Remiel, recognizing their vital roles in the celestial framework. Yet even in that ancient text, Remiel's description carried a gentler tone. He wasn't portrayed as one who wrought mighty acts, but as a keeper. of souls, of memories, of quiet hopes too delicate for a brutal world. His relationships with his fellow archangels revealed his heart more than any title could. Michael, despite his warrior's fire, cherished Remiel's gentleness. He often asked him to tend to the wounded left behind after battle. Gabriel respected Remiel's profound ability to listen. When his messages required exceptional care, he would seek his brother's quiet wisdom. Raphael recognized a kindred spirit in Remiel's compassion, though their approaches were distinct. Raphael actively healed, while Remiel created the emotional space for healing to begin. Uriel deeply valued Remiel's capacity to help others face difficult truths, without letting those truths destroy them. And Serhel, perhaps most surprisingly, formed one of the strongest bonds with him. Both angels understood the need for quiet watching. Both believed in the sacredness of long patience. They often stood together, saying nothing, simply observing the gradual unfolding of divine design. Together, these 6 archangels and Remiel formed a perfect council. Each brought something irreplaceable to the governance of creation. Their strengths, so different, came together like facets of the same eternal diamond. Yet among them all, Remiel held a special place. He was the shepherd of souls. While others defended bodies or rescued minds, Remiel tended the deeper currents, the essence of beings that dreamed and longed and wept and reached for something greater. This role, once subtle, would only grow more crucial. As creation advanced and life became more complex, souls began to suffer. They began to make choices that led to grief. The universe would always need warriors. It would always need teachers. But more than ever, it would need someone to care for the individual soul with infinite, unwavering tenderness. Remiel was that someone, and he stood quietly, faithfully ready to offer comfort to all who would one day need it most. In the golden ages of creation, when heaven's order felt eternal and incorruptible, the first seeds of tragedy were not sown by rebellion, but by something more subtle: curiosity. The Watchers, those powerful angels tasked with observing and gently guiding the development of creation, began to feel something unexpected stirring in their hearts. At first, it was only innocent wonder. They witnessed new worlds springing into existence, forms of life emerging that were increasingly intricate and astonishing in their beauty. They saw the first beings begin to love, to hope, to dream of futures not dictated by instinct. To the Watchers, these things were baffling and wonderful. How could creatures so bound by time and space touch something so eternal? The Watchers themselves had been created complete, perfect in knowledge and purpose. And yet, these frail mortals seemed to uncover joys unknown even to angels. The early interest was harmless. The Watchers reported their observations with enthusiasm to the heavenly councils. Their excitement grew, their stories filled with names. Not of species, but of individual people. Not just patterns, but personal struggles, personal victories. Remiel began to notice the change in his brothers. Their reports had taken on new tones, less like dispassionate accounts and more like affection. In quiet discussions with his fellow archangels, he voiced gentle concern. Not in rebuke, such was not his nature, but with a growing awareness that something subtle and profound was shifting. Change in eternal beings was no small matter, and that change was quickening. Some Watchers began to identify too closely with specific human tribes and families. They no longer thought of themselves as mere observers. They started seeing themselves as guardians, as friends, even as necessary parts of human lives. The line that once clearly separated the divine from the mortal began to blur. Michael, bearing the weight of leadership, called several councils to address this growing unease. The discussions within the heavenly councils were approached with utmost care and reverence. These Watchers were not rebels in the traditional sense. They were devoted, faithful servants whose hearts had become too intimately entwined with those they were sent to observe. The true challenge was how to gently redirect their growing attachment without extinguishing the sincere compassion that had awakened within them. Remiel, as always, participated in these gatherings with thoughtful, measured grace. While others warned of the risks this attachment posed, he also acknowledged the beauty it contained. An expansion of their capacity to love, which, though dangerous, was not evil in itself. The concern wasn't that they had begun to care. It was that they had started to care in ways that breached the sacred boundaries they were meant to uphold. Some Watchers defended their shifting attitudes with fervent conviction. They spoke of suffering they had seen, pain that could have been prevented with the slightest intervention. They had witnessed untapped potential in humanity that cried out for guidance. They asked, how could they simply stand by when they could make a difference? Why should they be condemned to passive watching when their influence could uplift an entire world? Heaven's leadership responded with clarity and compassion. The divine plan required that certain lines remain uncrossed. Humans were meant to find their own strength. They had to choose their paths freely, grow through their own struggles, discover their wisdom without being carried there. To interfere too deeply was to steal the very growth that made humanity beautiful. But as time moved forward, the restraint grew harder to maintain. Some watchers began to justify minor intercessions. They told themselves these small acts surely didn't violate the divine order. After all, weren't they created to serve? Wasn't helping a form of obedience? Over time, these rationalizations became more intricate, more convincing. Some began to believe they were actually better serving the divine plan by taking action. Others went further, imagining that heaven's leadership simply didn't grasp the complexity of life on earth. They thought their insights, shaped by direct contact with humanity, were indispensable. Throughout all of this, Remiel watched in silence, sorrow growing quietly in his heart. He could see the path they were walking and where it would inevitably lead. Though he hoped still, faintly, that they might turn back, he recognized the depth of the spiritual transformation already underway. As a shepherd of souls, he was attuned to how noble intentions could twist into something dangerous, especially when they began to conflict with divine wisdom. And so, Remiel began to speak gently, one-on-one, to the watchers he sensed were most vulnerable. He listened without judgment, honored the sincerity of their emotions. But with tenderness, he reminded them of the higher order they were a part of. Some heard his voice and returned to peace, realigning with their original purpose. But others had already wandered too far. Their hearts had become so wrapped in the affairs of earth that they could no longer discern the whispers of heaven. The cries of human pain rang louder in their ears than the counsel of archangels. Remiel understood the heartbreaking irony of it all. These angels were not falling from arrogance or hatred. They were falling from love. But love that had become possessive, impatient, and self-justifying. They genuinely believed they were helping creation, even as they prepared to abandon the very harmony that made creation sacred. As the crisis grew, so too did the frequency of heavenly counsels. The time for patient conversation was drawing to a close. Soon, choices would have to be made. Each watcher would need to decide, between the attachments they had formed and the vows they had sworn, between earth and heaven. In the silence of his private chambers, Remiel readied his spirit for the grief to come. He knew, with an ache beyond words, that some of his cherished brothers were about to fall, and that when they did, they would be lost to heaven, at least for a time. And he also knew, with solemn certainty, that the world would soon need those who could tend to the spiritual wounds their fall would leave behind. The age of harmony was ending. The age of sorrow was about to begin. The descent did not come in a burst of rebellion or chaos. It unfolded slowly, deliberately, over a season of soul-searching certainty. 200 watchers, led by their chief Samjaza, chose to descend. They would not go as visiting messengers or distant observers. They would take a permanent dwelling on earth. To them, heaven had grown too confining, its rules too rigid for their expanded emotions. They believed that humanity required their help more than heaven required their obedience. They chose Mount Hermon as their crossing point, a mountain that rose like a sacred question, its peak bridging heaven and earth. It seemed the perfect witness for their departure from one realm and their entry into another. Their preparations were careful and solemn, filled with reverence and heartache. Each of them understood this decision would be final. They would not return unchanged. They could not. The very act of prioritizing mortal affairs over divine law would alter who they were. No longer fully angel. Not truly human. Something else entirely. Remiel watched all of this unfold with a grief too deep for tears. Other archangels responded with righteous fury, or tactical concern, or determination to contain the damage. But Remiel felt only sorrow, a sorrow born of love that would not let go. He visited many of the watchers in their final moments in heaven. Their conversations were quiet, filled more with presence than with words. He did not argue with them. He did not plead. That time had passed. Instead, he sat with them. He listened. He understood. He loved. Some of the watchers, with tears in their eyes, asked for his blessing. It tore at his soul. How could he bless a path that would lead to suffering? And yet, how could he withhold love from brothers who acted from misguided compassion? In the end, he placed his hand upon their foreheads, whispered words not of approval, but of remembrance, of safety, of love that would not forget. The descent began at twilight, when the boundaries between realms blur and veil. One by one, the watchers released their grip on heaven's light and surrendered to earth's gravity. Their luminous forms shimmered and shifted as they fell, reshaping themselves to abide by the laws of the world they had chosen. From his high sanctuary, Remiel watched them vanish like stars sinking below a dark horizon. He watched as a shepherd would watch sheep straying into wild woods. Helpless to follow, but unwilling to stop caring, a part of them longed to go with them, to offer guidance still, to keep loving them where they had gone. But his calling held him in place. Heaven would need him more than ever. Soon, the responsibilities placed upon him would stretch far beyond anything he had ever known. As the Watchers landed, the mountain trembled, not with physical force, but with the spiritual shockwave their decision unleashed. An earthquake not of stone, but of order, of law, of heaven itself. The delicate balance that had once held the divine and mortal realms in harmony now quivered and swayed. With the Watchers' descent, that equilibrium shifted, sending ripples outward from Mount Hermon like stones breaking the stillness of a sacred pond. On earth, the fallen angels entered their new lives with a strange mix of wonder and hardship. Though their powers had diminished, they still far exceeded anything possessed by mortals, which caused them to be revered, often feared, as gods among men. Their sacred knowledge, accumulated across eons in the heavenly realm, had the potential to catapult human civilization ahead by thousands of years in the span of a single generation. Yet in their new state, the Watchers encountered limitations they had never anticipated. Time now weighed upon them with a pressure they had never known. Their once eternal forms began to feel the press of urgency. And physical needs, hunger, fatigue, pain, began to call for attention they had never before needed to give. More astonishing still was what happened to their capacity for love. What had expanded as divine compassion now grew entangled with human emotions. Jealousy, longing, disappointment, and grief. The irony could hardly have been more profound. In their pursuit to liberate humankind from pain by abandoning the divine order of heaven, they found themselves weighed down by the very burdens that had made mortal existence so agonizing in the first place. What they had once regarded as mere restrictions, biological limits, and constraints placed upon flesh, they came to understand, too late, were not just shackles, but sacred endowments, boundaries that encouraged resilience. Guardrails that gently directed purpose and limitations that shaped growth like wind shapes stone. In heaven's absence of their presence, there lingered a haunting silence. A void like a missing note in a symphony, a chord now incomplete. Vast halls once filled with celestial harmony now stood still and empty. Thrones unoccupied, echoing the cost of their defiance. The angels who remained behind carried on, but their movements took on a solemnity they had never known before. For the first time, they began to grasp an unsettling truth. Even beings crafted in divine perfection could stray from the path of light, and in doing so, dim the heavens with sorrow. In the midst of this quiet reckoning, Remiel's purpose began to shift. With countless fellow Watchers now absent, he inherited the immense responsibility of vast stretches of creation. Territories once carefully tended by many now lay within his charge alone. His already expansive compassion, once more than enough, was now stretched across galaxies of sorrow, and the weight of his calling pressed against the core of his heart. Yet in this time of great loss, he became more than just a caretaker. To the angels who remained, Remiel became a lighthouse in the storm, a pillar of calm for those overwhelmed by grief and confusion. They turned to him, searching his face for meaning, asking questions that had no simple answers. How could emissaries of divine love give birth to such suffering? How could creatures of light learn to embrace imperfection? Or worse, be seduced by it? No resolution came swiftly, but through his gentle constancy, many found serenity amid the uncertainty. Still, Remiel's mission could no longer remain confined to observation or silent compassion. The descent of the Watchers had ignited a cascade of consequences, reverberations echoing far beyond their original act of rebellion. Their choices tore into the fabric of time, spawning new sorrows, unfamiliar confusion, and unimagined forms of suffering. And wherever suffering deepened and multiplied, new expressions of mercy and radical compassion would be desperately required. Remiel, possessing the rare empathy born of millennia spent guiding souls, understood that his role was about to evolve beyond anything he had foreseen. The fallen had unintentionally given rise to an age of injury, a future where healing would not be swift, and where wounds would stretch across generations. It would fall to angels like him, not angels of conquest, but of care, to minister in this wounded future, formed not by grandeur or command, but by an unshakable devotion to love. As the final light flickered and dimmed atop Mount Hermon, and the Watchers began their strange, uncertain lives among the humans. Remiel entered what would become the longest and most profound vigil of his eternal existence. The era of unspoiled innocence was fading into memory. In its place dawned a new epoch, an age of layered mercy, where compassion would be summoned in forms and moments never imagined by heaven's architects. Though his brothers had fallen from the heights of paradise, they had not for one heartbeat, fallen from his love. And the human beings they had descended to protect, however clumsily, would need that love in ways they could never begin to comprehend. The fall of mankind did not roar into being with a crash or cataclysm. It crept in quietly out. Subtle, almost invisible shifts, like shadows that grow longer at the edge of twilight. The Watchers had come with the purest of intentions. They admired the beauty in humankind, felt drawn to its vulnerability and potential, and longed to guide it, to protect it, to see it flourish. But the knowledge they bore, their sacred, celestial inheritance, came with hidden costs. Costs they could neither predict nor control. They revealed secrets to humanity that had taken heaven eons to distill. Mysteries whispered across cosmic time, now offered to creatures who had barely mastered planting grain or shaping fire. They taught them to read the stars, to draw power from roots and leaves, to forge tools of war and craft wonders of artistry. Knowledge of healing, combat, adornment, and celestial beauty poured into human hands like molten light into fragile glass. At first, it seemed miraculous. Civilizations blossomed in decades where once they would have taken centuries. Cities rose in splendor. Weapons struck with unfathomable precision. Human expression, in beauty and art, reached breathtaking heights. And for a fleeting time, the Watchers believed they had done well. They believed they had improved the world. But wisdom, if severed from the slow seasoning of experience, becomes a fire that burns in both directions. Knowledge without understanding, power without patience, gifts bestowed before the heart is mature enough to bear them. These are not gifts at all. They are seeds of unraveling. Even the Watchers themselves were transformed. Living so closely among mortals awakened things within them they had never known they could feel. They envied the favor given to others. They grew possessive over the people they guided. And most dangerously of all, they began to hunger not for service, but for adoration. They who had once served the divine now longed to be worshipped. Some took mortal women as lovers. Crossing boundaries meant never to be touched. And from these unnatural unions came the Nephilim, beings born with celestial power, but none of the restraint or wisdom to wield it. Offspring who defied the balance of creation itself. They grew in stature beyond all reason, immense and overwhelming. But it was their appetites that swelled even more. Colossal beings who roamed the earth like sentient storms, consuming not only food and land, but entire ecosystems, entire ways of life. Their hunger knew no bounds. It was not simply a hunger of the body, but a deeper, more terrifying hunger, a craving for control, for domination, and most of all, for worship. Wherever their shadows fell, ruin was not far behind. Tools once forged in heaven to guide and uplift were twisted into instruments of conquest. And humankind, now armed with knowledge never meant for their age, learned not only to defend themselves, but to obliterate their enemies. Wars broke out across the earth, not for truth or justice, but for territory, for access, for the favor and patronage of the Watchers. Yet the devastation went deeper than broken walls or fallen bodies. It infected the very essence of what it meant to be human. The heart began to deform. Where trust had once been, suspicion took root. Where kindness had bloomed, now stood cynicism and guarded cruelty. Strength became an excuse, a license to exploit, to harm, to rise by stepping on others. Cruelty was no longer punished, it was rewarded. Women, in particular, bore a devastating share of the suffering. They were no longer seen as sacred companions in the story of creation, but became trophies, possessions, or prey, coveted by both the fallen angels and the monstrous giants they had sired. They were stripped of their agency, reduced to roles forged in desire and power, not love or dignity. The holy framework of human relationships strained, then cracked. Families splintered under the pressure. Communities that had once thrived on unity dissolved into fragments. Entire lineages were reshaped, irreversibly, by unions that defied nature's design. Even knowledge, that first bright flame gifted from the heavens, hurtled into a curse. Humans learned how to create weapons of staggering destruction, but they never learned how to resolve conflict. They discovered how to adorn themselves with breathtaking artistry, yet forgot how to cherish the quiet beauty in simple things. They became masters of exerting power, but lost the discipline to wield it with humility or grace. The arts, which had once been pure conduits of spiritual elevation, began to darken. Music, once a celestial echo of joy and wonder, was bent into a tool of persuasion, then control. Poetry, once the voice of the soul, was contorted into calculated propaganda. Dance, a celebration of vitality and freedom, was repurposed to reflect dominance, seduction, or submission. Not even healing was spared. The knowledge of plants and roots, once used to comfort the suffering, now gave rise to poisons, subtle, lethal, and cruel. Understanding of the human body, once a sacred map, became the blueprint for new forms of torture, each more precise, more devastating, more monstrous than the last. But among all these layers of corruption, none fell harder than the sacred instinct of devotion. Religion, which should have lifted human hearts toward the Creator, began instead to bend their gaze downward, toward the watchers. Worship lost its purity. It became a grotesque parody of reverence. Sacrifices grew not only more extravagant, but more horrifying. The giants demanded offerings of unspeakable cost, draining entire villages, entire regions. Altars, once symbols of peace and communion, now ran red with innocent blood. Places once walked by the divine were drowned in echoes of agony. The sacred became desecrated, and the songs once offered to heaven were replaced by screams that pierced the very soul of creation. And the earth responded. It groaned under the weight of this unnatural rebellion. The sacred rhythm of nature, that careful tuning crafted by divine hands, was shattered. The seasons fell out of step. Harvests failed without warning. Waters, once pure and life-giving, turned bitter and sour. The harmony that once pulsed through creation like a living song now throbbed with a discordant, desperate cry. From his place of holy observation, Remiel witnessed it all. Every fracture, every shriek, every perversion of what had once been sacred. He watched with eyes that could not look away, and a heart that felt every wound as though it were his own. The humans he had once watched with joy, those radiant creatures of innocence and boundless potential, now writhed in a suffering deeper than anything that had ever existed. And yet, the sharpest pain of all came from the bitter truth that lay beneath it. The Watchers had not descended out of malice. They had come because they loved. They could not stand the sight of human pain, but in their effort to erase it, they had magnified it into something unrecognizable. Other angels, those not fallen, but still shaken, came to Remiel seeking answers, hearts heavy with grief and bewilderment. How could a love so genuine birth destruction so vast? How could motives once noble beget outcomes so vile? Remiel answered not with certainty, but with the slow, weighty truth carried by one who had absorbed every sorrow. He did not blame the love. The love itself had been true, but it had been love untethered from its source. It had been love that no longer bowed to the divine wisdom, that had given it shape and sanctity. The Watchers had indeed loved humanity, but they had ceased to love the order that gave their love meaning. They had trusted the beating of their own hearts, more than the infinite wisdom of the one who made those hearts. Yet even now, as he stood at the edge of a world unraveling, even as darkness thickened over the earth, Remiel's hope did not break. He believed, still, that true love, the kind rooted in holy order and unshakable wisdom, would rise again, that redemption would one day reach even this depth. The brokenness was vast, but it would not, could not, be the final word. Justice would come, and after justice, mercy would rise to do its healing work. In the meantime, Remiel devoted himself entirely to preparation and prayer. The chaos could not be allowed to continue forever. The time was approaching, swiftly, when heaven would act. And when that moment arrived, many would need the gentle care that only Remiel could provide. The age of unchecked corruption was peaking. The age of divine judgment loomed just ahead. And beyond that, beyond even judgment, there would remain the hope of redemption for all those who had not chosen evil beyond return. The earth itself began to cry, not symbolically, but literally. Its groaning could be heard by those with ears attuned to the Spirit. What had once been quiet communication between creation and creator now surged as an urgent, unmistakable plea. The voice of the earth echoed from every wounded region, from forests laid bare by giants, from rivers stained with innocent blood, from mountains hollowed by greed. This cry was no poetic expression. It was a spiritual reality, perceived by angels and prophets alike. The planet had become aware of its pain, in a way that mirrored humanity's own growing awareness of sorrow. Creation had been made as a harmonious whole, but now that unity was fractured, and the rupture sent tremors through every part of the system, seen and unseen, physical and spiritual. Animals fled from places where giants tread, driven not just by danger, but by a deep, instinctive knowing that something was spiritually wrong. Birds altered their flight paths. Insects abandoned entire regions. Even the smallest creatures recognized places that had become inhospitable not just to the body, but to the soul. The ancient rhythms of nature began to collapse. Springs dried where they had always flowed. Fertile valleys withered without cause. Rain stopped falling where once it had been abundant, and storms raged in places that had never known such fury. Trees and plants seemed to recoil not just from drought or blight, but from the invisible toxin of emotional despair spreading through the hearts of humankind. Gardens that had flourished for generations went barren. Fruit trees bore bitterness. Even weeds, the hardiest of all flora, withered in soil steeped in sorrow. The corruption had burrowed beneath the surface of the earth, contaminating not just ecosystems, but the very soul of creation. The sacred balance between matter and spirit, between chaos and order, between the justice of heaven and the mercy of the divine. All had been thrown off by the Watcher's well-meant but disastrous interference. Human suffering echoed the earth's lament. Even if most people couldn't name its cause, their pain pulsed through the ground beneath their feet. Mothers sobbed for children taken by giants, and their tears soaked into the soil, becoming subterranean rivers of grief. Fathers, crushed by war and loss, found their sorrow mirrored in groaning forests and broken hills. The grief of individuals was no longer separate. It had become part of the pain of the world itself. A chorus of suffering rose day and night, a dirge carried on both wind and spirit. Heaven listened. The divine heart, which had once rejoiced over the beauty of Eden, now received the dirge of a wounded world with unwavering compassion. And with growing resolve, something would have to be done. The choice to allow this rebellion to run its course had shown its full consequence, and it could not continue. Among the angels, none felt this more keenly than Remiel. His role as shepherd of souls made him exquisitely sensitive to every note of sorrow, but his position as a bridge between divine mercy and created need allowed him to feel the pain and understand heaven's measured response. He spent hour upon hour communing with creation, listening to stories never spoken aloud. The mountains remembered peace. The oceans wept at their own confusion. The rivers mourned as they carried not just sediment, but the residue of lost hope. Forests whispered of root systems unable to reach upward, starved not of water, but of light and meaning. Each cry struck Remiel's heart like a personal plea, and his compassion widened beyond even the human soul. He now embraced the grief of all creation. And yet, beneath all the pain, he perceived something remarkable. There was a thread of faith still woven into the earth's cry, a persistent, sacred trust that had not been extinguished. Creation wept, yes, but it wept with hope. Its sobs were not for despair, but for redemption. And this faith moved Remiel deeply. If the earth itself could still believe, then how much more should the servants of heaven trust? In love's final victory, the cries rising from the earth were not just distress calls. They were prayers, yearning not just for relief, but for restoration. And these cries served another purpose. They testified. They proved, with unmistakable clarity, that the situation on earth could not be dismissed. No one could claim the corruption was minor. No one could argue it would pass on its own. When the very soil screamed, when the trees mourned, when rivers groaned, the case for divine intervention became undeniable. God heard every voice, every cry, every groan, every tear, and heaven waited, not with delay, but with precision. The moment for justice was approaching, and it would come neither too soon nor too late. In the councils of eternity, The earth's cries joined with the faithful reports of the angels still loyal, creating a complete, undeniable testimony. The evidence had been gathered. The decision was near. The rebellion of the Watchers had set off consequences that reached far beyond their own lives. Their actions rippled into every aspect of creation, affecting not only themselves and their human companions, but also the very fabric of existence itself. Remiel stood in the heavenly councils as both a witness and an advocate. His words were not just informed by observation, but by the burden of feeling creation's suffering firsthand. Yet even amid the pain, his counsel always sought the path of balance, calling for justice tempered with mercy, and for healing that went deeper than mere punishment. The earth's sorrow was reaching its peak, a crescendo of anguish rising from every broken piece of the natural order. Creation was no longer whispering. It was crying out for restoration, for righteousness, for wounds long buried to finally be made whole. And heaven, in its perfect wisdom, was preparing to respond. A response that would reverberate across eternity. Remiel readied himself for what was to come. His calling as shepherd of souls was about to widen into something far more vast than anything he had ever carried before. Then came the great council of heaven. The summons arrived not as a command, but as a soft, unmistakable drawing of every archangel's spirit toward the center of divine purpose. Michael felt it as the signal to prepare for war. Gabriel sensed it as the call to proclaim history-altering truths. Raphael heard the echo of coming healing. Uriel perceived it as the hour when hidden things would be revealed by light. And Remiel knew, with solemn certainty, that mercy was about to be measured beside justice, on scales that balanced the fate of eternity. The throne room of the Most High could not be described in terms of earthly grandeur. Its power lay not in decoration, but in the purity of presence. There, in the heart of existence, the light of the divine suffused every detail. It was a radiance so absolute that even the brightest stars seemed dull. Yet it felt gentle, not searing, welcoming, not overpowering. The archangels took their ancient positions in a circle. Each one stood as an embodiment of a different facet of divine essence. Their order had been established before time itself, not by status or power, but by the sacred gifts each brought to the eternal council. Together, they formed a living geometry of heavenly wisdom, a mandala of perfect harmony. The silence that filled the space before the voice spoke was dense with sacred meaning. It was not emptiness, but fullness, pregnant with the weight of destiny. Each archangel readied their heart, understanding that the words to come would reshape all that had been. And then, the voice came. It did not thunder. It did not rage. But it rang through every corner of creation with clarity that shook the stars. The message was simple, but its reach was infinite. The situation on Earth had crossed the threshold. Intervention was no longer just justified. It was required for the survival of creation itself. The divine analysis was detailed, heartbreaking. The rebellion of the Watchers had unleashed a cascade of rot, a corruption that threatened to erase the beauty and nobility of humankind. The giants, born of forbidden unions, devoured what was meant for others. The knowledge that had once been sacred was now used to multiply pain instead of relieve it. But through it all, the divine voice never betrayed anger. There was sorrow, profound, aching sorrow. There was resolve to limit the harm and restore balance. And through it all flowed an oceanic love that refused to abandon even those who had turned away. Each archangel received a mission, a role in this divine restoration as intricate and vital as the threads in a tapestry. Michael was to lead heaven's armies. His strength would be needed to bind the fallen Watchers, to restrain beings who still held remnants of their celestial might. Gabriel would bring messages to the scattered righteous, proclamations of coming judgment, yes, but also glimmers of hope for those still aligned with heaven's will. Raphael would begin the sacred labor of healing. He would tend the wounds of nature, restore broken patterns in creation, and strengthen what remained for the rebuilding to come. Uriel would ignite the flames of divine justice. His light would expose every hidden wrong, burn away the deepest layers of corruption, yet always leave room for growth to begin anew. Then came Remiel's assignment. When it was spoken, all understood why he, the gentlest among them, had been chosen for the task most quietly monumental. He would oversee the resurrection of the dead. He would shepherd the souls of those who would perish in the days ahead. This was a task of staggering magnitude. Judgment would not only reach the living, it would touch all who had ever lived. Those waiting in rest, those confused in shadow, those weighed by regret. Some souls would awaken for their final verdict. Others, corrupted or lost, would require patient discernment. Their stories, their motives, their innermost truths, each would be heard. And Remiel, with his bottomless compassion, was the only one who could carry that burden. His patience would be a balm to souls reeling from lifetimes of chaos. His gentleness would offer courage to those afraid of the truth. His clarity would reveal the mercy still available to even the most broken. The task also revealed the wisdom behind Remiel's absence from earthly descent. To carry out this mission, he had to remain fully immersed in divine presence. He could not be tainted by the corruption below. He needed to be an unclouded vessel of love. Remiel accepted his role without fanfare, but his brothers felt the weight settle upon him like a shroud. He understood what lay ahead. He would witness more grief than ever before. Every soul he touched would carry wounds, confusion, or the aching burden of guilt. Yet even as this sorrow loomed, he saw the hope within it. Judgment would not be an end. It would be the passage to something new. Through this valley of reckoning would come the sunrise of renewal. The souls he would guide would not stay in pain forever. They would journey toward a joy greater than anything they had ever known. As the council drew to its close, each archangel stood firm in the role they had received. Together, they would move in perfect harmony, justice and mercy working not in opposition, but side by side. As they prepared to depart, Remiel felt a moment of deep, wordless unity with his celestial siblings. They were about to be scattered, to battlefields, to burning cities, to lost forests and broken souls. Yet their purpose remained singular, their love undivided, their bond eternal. The great work had begun. Heaven was rising to mend the wounds of creation, to bring back the order that made love sustainable. And at the very heart of it, a quiet archangel stood ready to lead countless souls through the darkest valley they would ever walk, and toward the most radiant dawn they had never dared to dream. The judgment of the Watchers came not in fire or fury, but with the quiet finality of justice that could no longer be delayed. Across the earth, in hidden valleys and atop sacred mountains where the fallen Watchers had made their homes, the atmosphere thickened with a sense of inescapable reckoning. The long-anticipated moment had arrived. Consequences would no longer wait. Michael descended first. His arrival was not heralded by trumpet blasts or displays of might, but by the stilling of the world itself. Birds ceased their song. Winds hushed into silence. Even the giants halted their movements, sensing a profound shift in the invisible balance of power. Michael came not as a vengeful warrior, but with the sorrow of one who must now confront brothers once beloved. These beings he faced had once stood beside him in the highest councils of heaven. Together they had sung the harmonies of creation. Together they had shaped eternal purpose. Now, he met them not as allies, but as rebels, beings who had cast away their rightful place in the divine order. Meanwhile, Raphael moved gently across the ravaged surface of the world, his presence like the early morning sun melting frost from broken fields. Where his touch fell, restoration began. Springs flowed once more. Poisoned soil stirred and slowly remembered how to nurture life. Gabriel's voice spread like wind across continents. To those few human communities that had remained faithful despite overwhelming darkness, he delivered messages filled with both warning and promise. Judgment was near, but it would not be total annihilation. Those who had remained true to their purpose would find both protection and hope. Uriel ignited flames not of destruction, but of purification. His fire burned away spiritual rot, yet spared the structures still capable of good. Nothing false could survive his light. Even the most deeply self-deceived saw their true reflections, and were forced to reckon with them. Amid this sweeping movement of divine action, Remiel remained in the heavenly domain, preparing for what was to come. His chambers, spiritual spaces without limit, expanded to receive an influx of souls so vast no earthly mind could conceive it. Souls would come from every age of human existence. Some would be newly released by death. Others had waited for eons in peace, now called forth to stand before the eternal order. The confrontation between Michael and the fallen Watchers unfolded in realms beyond physical sight. Their clash was not merely of might, but of principles, of eternal obedience versus personal will. The Watchers had chosen self-rule over divine wisdom. Michael stood as the embodiment of submission to higher truth. Some of the fallen fought with fury, straining to summon powers they no longer fully commanded. Others accepted their fate in heavy silence, finally realizing the scale of what they had lost. A rare few, broken and weary, even welcomed the intervention, recognizing that their rebellion had brought only misery where they had expected joy. The Nephilim, the giants born from unnatural unions, faced their own unraveling. Their immense bodies, once sustained by celestial energy, began to weaken as that power was stripped away. Many collapsed. Their mortal blood could no longer uphold the forms shaped by angelic inheritance. The reckoning was swift, but its echoes would last forever. Each fallen Watcher was judged, not only by what they had done, but by the core intentions that had driven them. True justice, in the divine sense, pierced beyond appearances. It sought the heart's root motivations. Remiel observed it all, his heart torn between sorrow and relief. The suffering on earth was finally beginning to abate. Yet those he had once loved as brothers were now being cast away from heaven, forever severed from the light they had once sung beneath. The pain of their loss etched itself into his eternal memory. The judgments were not one-size-fits-all. They matched the degree of corruption each angel had embraced. Some were bound in darkness, awaiting a final judgment yet to come. Others were sealed into isolated places, their presence hidden, their influence contained. A few, whose hearts had not fully turned, were given paths to eventual redemption. Their bindings weren't chains of iron, but limits woven directly into the structure of reality. They could no longer move freely between realms. They could not access their full knowledge. They were cut off from the means of replicating the damage they had caused. As this process unfolded, a stream of souls began arriving at the edge of Remiel's expanded domain. These weren't only the newly dead. They came from across the spectrum of human history. Each one required careful examination and deep, compassionate guidance. Among them were children, innocents slain in the chaos stirred by the Watchers. There were men and women who had struggled to hold on to goodness, while the world around them crumbled. There were those who had been deceived, taught lies, yet whose hearts had remained pure. And most difficult of all, those who had knowingly collaborated with the Watchers, but still carried flickers of guilt, of hesitation, of conscience. They had accepted power and knowledge they knew was wrong, seduced by promise and pressured by survival. These souls needed the most delicate care. Remiel approached each one with infinite patience. He did not judge them, but helped them see their own stories with unclouded eyes. He showed them where mercy could still reach, and how truth, when met with humility, could lead to peace. His presence became a sanctuary, a place where truth did not destroy, but healed. The judgment of the Watchers was more than a divine ruling. It marked a shift in all of history. The age of innocence was over, but a new age had begun, one where humanity, no longer under the deceptive influence of fallen beings, would face its future with freedom. They would be free to seek, to choose, to build relationship with the divine without distortion. Remiel, standing at the threshold of this new era, saw both the tragedy and the radiant possibility in what had unfolded. The corruption had been immense, but it had revealed, through its pain, just how far divine love was willing to go, how much it would bear to preserve creation. The gentle Archangel turned his attention to the path ahead. There would be no quick ending, only the long, sacred labor of guiding wounded souls toward the light they had nearly forgotten. And Remiel would walk beside them every step of the way. The judgment had reached its end, but healing, true, lasting healing, would stretch far beyond it. And Remiel would be present for every single moment, guiding each cherished soul gently toward the light that waits just past all darkness. Chains beneath the mountains, far beneath the crust of the earth, in hollows untouched by sunlight, unmarked by human steps, the fallen Watchers wait, bound in silence and shadow. Above them, the mountains tower skyward, rising like massive stone prayers. But no prayers ascend from the depths below. Only the silence of consequence remains. Here, in caverns sculpted by divine justice itself, the fallen angels begin their long sentence. And into this realm, where light has not touched since the binding, Remiel descends. His presence brings the only illumination these shadows have seen. A soft radiance born not of flame, but of mercy. The chains that hold the Watchers shimmer faintly, like starlight frozen in time. Unbreakable links forged in the heavenly furnaces, and sanctified by the breath of the Most High. The condemned hang suspended in darkness. Some strain against their bonds, flexing strength that once stirred oceans and toppled mountains. Now useless against a single divine link. Others have surrendered to stillness, wings folded tightly against their bodies. I shut in eternal meditation. A few whisper prayers. They speak to a God they know still hears, but who does not yet answer. This place, by divine decree, has become Remiel's domain, not chosen, but entrusted. For someone must watch the Watchers. Someone must ensure the chains remain secure. Someone must bear witness to their suffering, and remember the purpose it serves. The caverns stretch beyond comprehension. A network of chambers, each one isolated, each one holding a single fallen angel. They cannot speak to one another. They cannot offer solace or share their grief. Each one is left to face themselves, alone, as it must be. Remiel walks among them as a shepherd tending to a scattered, broken flock. His footsteps echo gently through the stone. He speaks no words. What words could bridge the distance between faithfulness and betrayal? So he observes. He remembers. He ensures that justice moves forward in its quiet, unrelenting way. Among those imprisoned are some Remiel once called friend. Azael, who taught humans the ways of war. Barakel, who revealed the secrets of the stars. Kokabel, who traced constellations for mortals to read. Remiel remembers their laughter in the halls of heaven, the eagerness in their hearts, the shimmer of their wings in eternal light. Now those wings hang limp, drained of glory. Their eyes, once ablaze with divine fire, have dimmed to flickering embers. Their voices, once part of the heavenly choir, now tremble in hushed regrets. And yet, even here, even in this prison of consequence, mercy finds its quiet way. The chains do not torture. They simply bind. The darkness does not attack. It merely conceals. The silence does not torment. It invites self-reflection, forcing each fallen one to face themselves without distraction. Remiel understands this paradox deeply. Justice and mercy are not enemies here. They walk together, hand in hand. Even in these lowest depths, the Watchers suffer, yes, but they also wait. Their punishment is not eternal. It has a boundary, an eventual end. On the final day, when all things are measured and made new, even these beings will face one last judgment. Time flows strangely here. Minutes stretch into hours, hours into centuries. Generations rise and fall above them unnoticed. Only Remiel marks the passage of time. He counts each moment, like a celestial keeper of eternity. He watches how each fallen angel copes. Some burn with endless rage, their fury cold and quiet like snow that never melts. Others sink into despair so profound, it feels bottomless. And a few, a rare few, find a sort of peace. They use the silence to contemplate their fall and the meaning within their suffering. Above, rivers run and forests bloom. Humans live their bright, fleeting lives. But here, in the bowels of the world, nothing changes, except pride slowly giving way to humility, ignorance eroding into wisdom. Remiel often lingers before Samjaza, the ringleader of the rebellion. His chains are heavier than the others, etched with glowing symbols of divine judgment. Samjaza no longer fights. His mighty head bows low, his breath slow and measured. When Remiel draws near, Samjaza opens his eyes. In their depths flickers something that might be understanding. No words are exchanged. None are needed. Samjaza made his choice long ago. He led 200 angels into descent, choosing passion over duty, impulse over purpose, momentary pleasure over eternal joy. Now, he bears the full weight of that decision and the burden of every soul that was wounded by it. Across the caverns, other Watchers whisper at times, words lost between prayer and memory. Remiel hears them all. He becomes a living record, a keeper of regrets, of slow confessions, of wisdom gained too late. Once, these angels had held divine knowledge. Now, they were learning the hardest lesson of all, the true cost of free will. Sometimes, the chains hum, a low, resonant tone. Not cruel, not kind, simply present, a reminder of choices made, of order maintained, of justice fulfilled. In time, the children of the Watchers will perish in the great flood. Their forbidden knowledge will dissolve from memory, surviving only as fragments in legend. But beneath the surface, the Fathers remain, imprisoned, waiting, guarded by an archangel who forgets nothing and condemns no one. Remiel's vigil has only just begun. The chains will hold, the shadows will endure, until the last trumpet sounds. And through every long night, one faithful servant of heaven will walk these corridors, watching over those who once watched over man. In these lowest depths, justice and mercy still clasp hands in the dark, and Remiel stands eternal witness to both. Beneath Remiel, beneath the abyss, below the chains, below the caverns, beneath even the roots of mountains, there lies something deeper still. The abyss yawns open like a wound torn into the fabric of creation itself, a vast, infinite emptiness that predates even the first word ever spoken, that existed before the great divide between light and shadow. In this place that defies all earthly conceptions of space or time, where even form becomes fluid, Remiel's truest, most sacred work begins. The abyss does not scream or seethe, nor does it rage with fury. It waits, still and emits. Its silence is not simply an absence of sound. It is a pressure, heavy and consuming, that weighs down upon every soul who crosses its unseen threshold. This is the domain where the in-between dwell, not the living, nor the truly dead, but the uncertain, those caught in limbo, suspended between states, between decisions, suspended between desperate hope and encroaching despair. Remiel descends farther than any angel was ever intended to travel. His wings, once luminous with the eternal radiance of heaven's purest light, now cut through a darkness so absolute that it seems to have texture and mass, each wing beat drawing him deeper and deeper into a place where time flows like honey, slow, thick, distorted, and where the laws of physics bend around truths not meant for mortal understanding. The souls that linger here communicate not through words, but by presence, by the unspoken language of memory and ache. One woman, who died in the anguish of childbirth, stretches eternally for the infant she will never touch. A soldier fallen in ancient war fights battles that ended long before memory began. A philosopher, once consumed by his pursuit of truth, now stares into formless void, coming to realize that some questions, even the deepest, may never yield answers. These are not the damned, their journey leads elsewhere. These are the hesitant, the burdened, the good who could not quite release the pain they carried. They hover through the abyss like stars torn from constellations, each imprisoned within a sphere of their own unresolved sorrow. Through these shadows, Remiel moves with boundless patience. He does not judge, judgment is not his office here. Nor does he offer false comfort, for platitudes would be cruel in a place where raw truth is sacred. He brings only himself, his presence alone often enough to remind the forgotten that they are still seen. One such soul approaches, his features fluid and changing, shifting from youth to age, from regret to wonder, a reflection of all he might have been. Angel, the soul whispers, and his voice reverberates through the emptiness like a dropped pebble in a bottomless well. Am I dead? Remiel considers the question carefully, for in this place, simple answers unravel into complex truths. You are between, he replies at last, his voice soft as mist. Life and death are not the only thresholds. The spirit nods, accepting the answer as though it were always known. Will I remain here forever? He asks. Nothing is forever, says Remiel, except the love of God. Even this place, even this waiting, has a purpose. The spirit drifts away, perhaps comforted, perhaps not. Remiel journeys on through the never-ending dark. Every soul he meets becomes a thread in a tapestry still in the process of being woven. Every wordless conversation weaves itself into the story of creation. Time here flows unpredictably. What feels like an hour spent with one spirit may correspond to centuries above, while entire corridors of the abyss might pass by in what amounts to only seconds on Earth. Its rhythm obeys no calendar but its own. He meets souls from every age of history. An Egyptian priest clutching forgotten prayers, a Norse warrior seeking a Valhalla that never truly was, a Native American shaman calling out to ancestral spirits who no longer answer. All drift through this space between spaces, united in disorientation, bound by shared yearning. Some recognize him instantly. They see the glimmer of his wings, sense the celestial gentleness he brings, and ask in longing voices, "Have you come to lead us home?" His answer is always the same and always truthful. "I have come to walk with you." But the path home is one each soul must discover for itself. It might sound harsh, but it is not. Just as in life, no one can undertake another's most important journey. Each soul must choose, cling to sorrow, or surrender it into the waiting dark. Remiel bears witness to these choices. He cannot make them, but he can offer his presence as beacon and shelter. He finds souls who have been here since before the Great Flood, still entangled in regrets thousands of years old. Others have only just arrived, lives ended abruptly by misfortune or age. Time is irrelevant here. The journey to healing, to understanding, takes as long as needed. The abyss sometimes feels alive, reactive to the souls it holds. When one finally releases their ancient bitterness, the darkness lightens subtly. When another forgives a long-held wound, the silence lifts just slightly. The place shifts and bends, shaped by the collective journey of its inhabitants. Remiel witnesses these changes with infinite grace. He sees the movements of transformation like waves rippling through deep waters, cycles of anguish followed by revelation. His presence, steady and luminous, gives shape to this place, a constant where everything else shifts like vapor. Some souls have lost all will to move, buried so deep in hopelessness they seem unreachable. These are Remiel's most delicate tasks. How do you touch someone who refuses to be touched? How do you offer hope to a spirit that has forgotten what hope is? Yet he tries. A brush of his wing might stir a memory. A whisper may awaken an echo of joy. He never forces healing. Free will is sacred, even here, but he opens doors and plants seeds, trusting that even in this soil, something good might eventually grow. The abyss sprawls without end in any direction, yet Remiel has mapped its shape through service. He knows where to pause, when to speak, and when silence is the better gift. This is his sacred craft, his dance with shadow and promise. In these deepest depths, where other angels dare not tread, he continues his work. The abyss may be bottomless, but his compassion is more profound. Its darkness may be boundless, but his light reaches deeper still. And it is between these poles of darkness and light that souls begin to shift, begin to move, begin to hope. Deeper still lies a truth even older than creation's first breath. The abyss keeps secrets beyond measure. Here, where silence presses like gravity and darkness has its own language, Remiel walks paths that materialize only beneath his steps. This place does not serve heaven, nor bow to hell. It is neutral, a domain for those suspended between one truth and another. Here, the rules of reality dissolve, like salt in endless water. Gravity becomes optional. Illumination arises not from a source, but from realization. Souls drift like fragments of dream, each carrying within them a universe of remembrance. Among them, Remiel finds a child, no more than 5, still clinging to a toy carved by her father's hand under the flickering flame of a candle. She does not cry, for tears do not flow in this realm. Instead, she radiates an innocent bewilderment, a soft questioning of absence. When her eyes meet Remiel's, her face brightens with unquestioning trust. "Are you my guardian angel?" she asks, her voice pure as spring water. "I'm a friend," he answers, lowering himself to her height. His wings enfold them both, forming a cocoon of warmth within the boundless cold. "Would you like me to walk with you a while?" She nods, and her tiny hand slips into his, more sensation than substance, like mist that remembers being rain. And so, they walk, together moving past other spirits, each immersed in their own slow awakening. The child holds up her toy, a simple pinewood horse smoothed over time by her small, devoted fingers. "Papa made this for me," she says with quiet pride, her voice tender and certain. "He told me it could take me anywhere I ever wanted to go." Remiel studies the carving with reverence, then gently asks, "And where is it you'd like to go, little one?" She pauses, eyes narrowing with the kind of serious contemplation that only children bring to such questions. Finally, she says, "Home, but I don't remember where that is anymore." That single sentence presses heavily on Remiel's eternal heart. Not pain in the human sense, for angels do not feel pain as mortals do, but something deeper, a kind of sacred ache, a piercing recognition of what has been lost. Home, for this child, has become not a place but an idea, shattered, scattered by the interruption of death before she could complete her journey through life. And yet, even in this in-between realm, this liminal space suspended outside time and space, home is not beyond reach. He teaches her how to listen, really listen, for the call of love that never fully fades. He shows her how to feel the invisible threads, delicate but unbreakable, that connect all souls across every distance, every lifetime. Slowly, her expression changes, her eyes widening as new awareness dawns. "I feel them," she whispers with wonder. "My papa's prayers, mama's tears, our dog, the one that used to sleep beside me. He's still waiting on my bed. They miss me." Her words are full of awe, not sorrow. "Yes," Remiel says, voice warm and sure. "And their love builds bridges stronger than anything else in existence. Your little horse, it was right. It can carry you anywhere you wish, even back home." She smiles, kisses her wooden toy softly, and whispers something into its ear, words only she will ever know. Then, with a light that begins to glow from within her very essence, she begins to fade, not into shadow, but into a radiance that welcomes her. And as she vanishes from sight, Remiel hears it, the soft echo of laughter, the thud of running feet, the unmistakable sound of a father's joyful voice calling his daughter's name across the great divide. But not all journeys in the abyss find such immediate resolution. In a nearby fold of shadow, Remiel finds an old man seated perfectly still, hands folded, eyes fixed ahead at something only he can perceive. He does not react when the angel approaches, offering no greeting. "I am waiting," he says calmly, though Remiel has not asked a question. "What do you wait for?" the angel inquires. "For the answer to reveal itself," the man replies. "I spent my whole life asking the wrong questions. Now I have all of eternity to think of better ones." Instead of words, Remiel offers company. He settles down beside the man, mirroring his posture, offering not guidance but presence. Sometimes the greatest mercy an angel can provide is simply to wait with someone who needs to wait. Time moves or doesn't. It hardly matters in the abyss. Whether minutes or millennia pass, the old man's breathing is calm, like the rhythm of someone who has finally embraced patience. At last, the man turns to the angel and speaks again, his eyes now bright with a wisdom hard-earned. "You are the one who remembers." "It is not a question. I am one who remembers," Remiel agrees. "Then remember this," the man says, voice like wind through an old forest. "Every question I failed to ask already held its answer, and every answer I clung to was just another question in disguise. The only truth that matters is the one too simple for words." He smiles, and in that smile, Remiel sees reflections of every seeker, every sage, every weary teacher who ever longed to understand. The man rises, dusts off robes stitched from memory itself, and walks forward into a light that blooms just for him. This is the rhythm of the abyss, souls encountering insight, unlocking release, and moving on. For every soul that ascends, another appears to take its place. The abyss neither empties nor overflows. It simply fulfills its sacred role, a place for souls to untangle the knots of existence, to understand, to accept, to let go. Remiel moves among them like the calm heart of a storm, unchanging amid all that swirls around him. His presence is a compass, a fixed star by which the lost may orient themselves. He doesn't rush them. He doesn't judge their pace. He is simply there, steadfast, gentle, enduring. Deeper still, in places where even silence doesn't echo, he meets souls so lost they've forgotten they are souls at all. These are the most delicate cases. A name, spoken softly, might awaken a memory. A strain of melody, long buried, might stir the echo of joy. He never forces. He never intrudes. He simply offers a gesture, a reminder, a space in which hope might awaken again. His work is slow, but satisfying. Each soul that steps from confusion into clarity adds a note to the great, unfolding symphony of redemption. Each moment of understanding sends ripples outward, making the abyss just a little less dark. Each release from sorrow weakens despair's grip and strengthens the quiet tide of hope. This is what he was made for. This is his sacred task. In the between of all other places, in the silence that lives between all sounds, he remembers. He listens. He walks beside those who have lost their way until they are found. But change is coming. Above the abyss, above the deep chambers where the watchers remain chained, above even the highest mountain peaks, a new storm gathers. The sky darkens with more than mere clouds. It pulses with divine intent. Heaven is weighing the earth, and the scales tilt heavy with sorrow. The corruption sown by the fallen has grown into a harvest of pain. The giants, born of forbidden unions, are too numerous and powerful. Humanity has devoured knowledge it was never meant to carry. Remiel senses it long before any creature of earth feels the wind shift. In the depths of the abyss, even the air thickens with looming judgment. Still souls pause. Shadows still themselves. Something vast begins to stir. He rises, wings slicing through unseen barriers, ascending through realms until he stands once more beneath a sky churning with celestial unrest. The world has changed. Towering cities built by giant hands sprawl beyond natural horizons. Weapons, infused with forbidden knowledge, shine with lethal promise in arsenals that never deplete. Humans wage wars with tactics whispered to them by angels. They forge tools from metals ripped from the earth's heart. They practice incantations that scar the very fabric of existence. But it is not the power that grieves heaven most. It is the absence of wonder. Mankind has accumulated knowledge without wisdom, capability without care. They build monuments not to honor, but out of boredom. They seek pleasures that numb instead of fulfill, victories devoid of meaning. And in doing so, they drift farther from the heartbeat of the divine. The very gift of free will, the divine spark that once made humanity so precious, has now become a curse they can no longer recognize. Remiel walks among them, unseen by mortal eyes, observing their lives, their longings, their silent dreams, and buried fears. In a few faces, he still sees remnants of the divine image they were created to carry. Some still whisper prayers to a God they no longer fully remember. Some offer kindness without knowing why it matters. Some show mercy as if something deep inside them instinctively knows that mercy is holy. But they are the minority, rare sparks in a sea of shadow. For every soul who retains even a thread of connection to their sacred origin, 10 more stumble through life blind to purpose, deaf to wonder, thinking they were born only to survive, to consume, to dominate. The knowledge gifted by the fallen watchers has made humanity cunning, inventive, dangerously clever, but not good, not wise. In a fading corner of the city, a young woman draws water from a well as evening deepens. She doesn't know the angel is watching her, but her hands move with quiet grace. Her posture carries dignity preserved against all odds. As she hums a melody without words, something that echoes faintly of heaven's ancient harmonies, she completes her task and turns. But instead of going home, she notices an old man seated nearby, too frail to lift his own bucket. Without pause or question, she fills his container and sets it beside him. She asks for nothing in return. She does not expect thanks. She simply recognizes need and chooses to answer it. In this small, uncelebrated moment, Remiel sees a glimpse of what humanity was meant to become. But she is rare. Around her, the city thrums with cruelty disguised as culture. Markets not only trade goods, but people. Sacred spaces host rituals twisted into mockery. Children are taught to steal before they are taught to speak, to dominate before they learn compassion. The corruption runs deeper than mere behavior. It has permeated the ground itself, poisoned the water, and infected the very air. Plants grow crooked in fields soaked with innocent blood. Animals no longer trust the hands of man. The earth beneath their feet aches, groaning beneath layers of sin that no plow can ever turn. And Remiel knows now that the flood must come, not out of wrath, not for vengeance, but as an act of cosmic surgery. This is love wielding the blade of justice. The cancer must be removed before it devours the last hope of healing. The infection must be cleansed before the host dies entirely. And yet, even with this knowledge, even with full understanding, the grief remains. For each soul destined to perish in the waters carries within it some echo of divine origin. Each life holds dreams that will now go unfulfilled. The flood will be merciful in its speed, but even mercy does not make it any less heartbreaking. As he wanders, Remiel encounters the man chosen to survive. the one whose line will carry the hope of future humanity, Noah. This righteous man cannot see the angel, but he feels something, a pressure building in the fabric of time. His prayers grow desperate. He knows something vast and terrible approaches, though its shape eludes him. Unlike the rest of mankind, Noah still listens for the voice of heaven. When the divine instruction comes, build the ark, he does not hesitate. He does not argue. He simply obeys. His neighbors laugh at him, mock him, call him mad. They cannot fathom a sea that would come to them. But Remiel knows they will. Day after day, year after year, Noah labors. His hands blister, crack, bleed, heal, and blister again. His back bends under timber and burden, and even his own family sometimes questions his sanity. But he does not stop, for Noah remembers what it means to trust something greater than sight or understanding. Then the animals begin to arrive, not driven by instinct, but drawn by the same voice that speaks to Noah's soul. They come in pairs, predator beside prey, walking side by side without fear or aggression. Even the monstrous remnants of the giant's legacy sense the end and search for refuge they will never reach. The sky darkens further. Lightning flickers without thunder, streaking endlessly across the horizon. The air becomes heavy, almost alive with judgment. Rivers reverse course. Birds fall silent. Insects disappear. All creation holds its breath. From a high hill, Remiel looks down on humanity's greatest city, stone and gold, towers and domes, rising in proud defiance. In mere days, it will be drowned beneath divine judgment. Every structure toppled, every street lost, the temples turned to ruins, the libraries to tombs. The records of forbidden knowledge will sink beneath water never meant to hold them. He does not weep. Angels do not weep as men do, but sorrow gathers in his being like twilight before a storm. So much beauty will be lost, so much promise extinguished. Yet this is the only path forward, the only possible rebirth. A great wind stirs. It carries the scent of distant rain. Far below, Noah seals the final seam of the ark. Inside, animals settle into stillness. The family prays and waits, unaware of the vastness of what they've been chosen for. And high above them all, above the clouds, above the breath of the storm, Remiel watches. He will witness every raindrop that falls. He will remember every soul that departs. He will honor every breath taken, every heartbeat silenced. Because someone must. Someone must carry the memory of what was, and hold it gently for what is to come. The age of the giants ends. The age of the flood begins this night. And when the waters recede, silence blankets the land like a shroud. The great cities are no more. Where towers once reached for heaven, now only soft hills remain. The flood has drawn back, retreating into ocean and sea, leaving behind a landscape cleansed and waiting. Remiel walks across this newborn world, his feet touching soil untouched by ambition, unstained by fallen hands. The air is crisp, the sunlight brighter, the sky scrubbed clean of ages of grief. On a mountaintop, the ark rests, its great form embracing the dawn. Noah and his family emerge slowly. They have been passengers on an ocean with no shore. Now they step into a land that feels both ancient and new. Noah kneels, presses his hands into the damp earth, and looks to the heavens. His prayer is silent, but heaven hears. Around him, his wife, his sons, his daughters-in-law, tired, uncertain, full of wonder, stand blinking in the bright morning. And behind them, the animals begin to stir, stepping out into a world reborn, moving once more toward the rhythm of divine purpose. The great cats emerge into morning sunlight, stretching their long limbs as their sleek fur glistens with mist from the retreating floodwaters. Birds take flight in joyful arcs, their wings slicing through the crisp air, cries echoing across a world reborn. Valleys resonate with fresh potential. Cattle and sheep scatter across emerald hills where grass now grows with impossible vigor, as if the earth itself is eager to live again. Remiel watches in quiet wonder as these first tentative steps unfold upon a cleansed earth. The flood has accomplished more than the purging of corruption. It has reset the very order of relationships between living beings. Predator and prey no longer glare at each other with old instincts of fear and hunger. Instead, they seem to pause in mutual awe, aware in some mysterious way that all have shared in something sacred and transformative. In this shared wonder, a new beginning unfolds, gentle, unspoken, miraculous. Noah, now the patriarch of all that remains, gathers stones untouched by human shaping. He builds the first altar of the new age, stacking them with reverence. The fire he lights blazes high and pure, its flames unbending, its smoke rising straight to heaven, unhindered by wind, as if drawn home by invisible hands. His offering is humble, grain preserved from the ark's dwindling stores, wine pressed from the memory of a lost world's grapes. Yet its power lies not in its elements, but in its heart. It speaks of gratitude beyond words, recognition of survival, and divine mercy that defies explanation. God's voice rolls like soft thunder through clear skies, promising that never again shall a flood destroy the earth. A rainbow spreads across the western horizon, more vivid than any seen before, its arcs gleaming like brushstrokes of covenant. It becomes a bridge between heaven and earth, between divine promise and human hope. And yet, as Remiel watches, he knows that this beginning, beautiful, serene, full of promise, is not the end of trouble. The human heart remains unchanged. Noah and his descendants still carry within them the same spark of free will that once burned into arrogance. Within that gift lies the potential for both beauty and betrayal, creation and collapse. Already, he sees subtle signs of what is to come. Noah plants a vineyard and learns wine's dual power, to soften sorrow and to confuse judgment. His sons, once united, now begin to jostle for legacy, for dominance, for favor. The animals, who once stood together in the ark in improbable peace, begin to drift back toward old instincts. The lion eyes the antelope once again. The hawk watches the mouse. The cleansing washed the world's face, but not its heart. The promise of this new age is real, but it cannot guarantee that those who walk in it will make different choices. Every generation will still have to answer the same timeless questions. Will they remember their Creator? Will they treat one another with dignity and compassion? Will they build with their hands or destroy with them? Remiel's role shifts now, not from guardian to warrior, but to something gentler, more enduring, a keeper of sacred memory. He becomes the silent voice reminding humanity of what has already been lost and what might be lost again. He watches as Noah teaches his sons to cultivate land and care for animals. These lessons, passed down through flood and fear, become the foundation stones of a civilization starting anew. Yet Noah does more than teach skills. He recounts stories. He speaks of the old world, of what it became when wisdom was forgotten and desire was left unchecked. He teaches not just the consequences of sin, but the mercy that outshone it. And as human life begins again, the world itself rises with them. Rivers tumble from mountain peaks, cold and clear, eager to shape valleys never before carved. Forests spread thick and wild, their branches heavy with birdsong untouched by dread. The plains stretch without blemish, unscarred by smoke or stone or violence. It is a canvas untouched, awaiting the brush of human creativity. And Remiel, though he sees the peace, sees also the cities yet to rise, the towers yet to fall, the same patterns that will replay through ages, the glories and failures that are yet to come. The flood wiped the surface clean, but did not rewrite the ending. That only humanity can do. Some changes, however, run deeper than what was erased. The open door between heaven and earth, the connection that once allowed angels to walk freely among men, is now shut. Since the fall of the Watchers, divine interaction has become rare, indirect. Now, dreams carry revelations. Visions hold prophecy. No more do burning wings stride openly into the streets. The time of clear signs has ended, replaced by a world where belief requires inner strength. This change brings hardship, yes, but also opportunity. With fewer signs, faith must grow stronger. Without miracles to compel it, goodness must arise from conviction, not compulsion. Remiel understands this shift and accepts it. He will not appear as he once might have. Instead, he works in subtler ways, through whispers of conscience, through gentle dreams that vanish on waking but leave behind lingering clarity, through unspoken pulls toward love, toward light, toward truth. The rainbow fades from view, but its message is engraved now into the code of creation itself. Never again shall a flood cover the earth, but this is no guarantee against future cleansing. Every generation will face a trial, a reckoning, a moment of choice between ease and righteousness. And as the first sun sets over a purified world, Remiel assumes his place not as a savior, but as a sentinel of memory, a guardian of hope. The flood is over. The story continues. Mankind has been given one more chance to fulfill its highest calling, to steward the garden, to bear the divine likeness, to walk as bridges between heaven and earth. And now, quietly and without end, the work begins anew, as steady and eternal as the turning of the stars. In the years that follow the Great Flood, as human civilization begins the slow, uncertain work of rebuilding itself from scattered families into emerging tribes and fledgling nations, quiet whispers begin to circulate, fragments of testimony, shared by those who have suffered and somehow found the strength to continue. They speak of a presence that walks unseen beside the grieving, a figure felt more than seen, known by many names, the comforter, the memory keeper, the one who waits in silence. But most often, when hope grows faint and shadows lengthen, when the burden of sorrow becomes too heavy for one's soul to bear alone, they speak of him simply and reverently as the Angel of Hope. Remiel has not changed in essence, for angels do not change as mortals do. Yet the transformation of the world after the flood has unveiled facets of his purpose that remained veiled during the era of overt divine intervention. Where once he stood apart, primarily observing and guarding those bound by divine justice, now he moves among humankind more intimately, participating in their daily sorrows and small triumphs, more present in the texture of ordinary lives. A widow kneels by her husband's grave, her hands trembling, her children's hunger pressing in like the cold wind, her future obscured in fog. She does not see the quiet figure who stands beside her in the fading light, but she feels the subtle shift in the air, grief easing slightly, like a door cracked open to let in breath. Despair, once suffocating, now loosens its grip, just enough for her to recall the core of strength buried beneath exhaustion. She rises and walks home, still grieving, still burdened, but now carrying a fragile seed of endurance that she had forgotten was hers. Remiel's presence moves like sunlight breaking through clouds, diffuse, gentle, unforced, but real in a way that cannot be denied. He does not offer solutions, does not hand out miracles or sweep away obstacles. Instead, he awakens within people the strength they already possess, the quiet courage that sorrow had hidden. He reminds them of connections that persist beyond sight and circumstance. He plants unseen seeds of possibility into places that feel too barren, too broken, too hopeless to ever bloom again. Among the earliest Christian thinkers, the Church Fathers who wrestled with mystery in candlelit scriptoria, Remiel is mentioned with special reverence. They describe him as a bridge spanning the seeming distance between divine justice and divine mercy, a being who proves that divine love never forgets its children, even when they feel forgotten themselves. St. John speaks of Remiel as the one who remembers on our behalf, the angel who holds the truth that every ending conceals a beginning, that even in death, the echo of resurrection remains. Augustine, in his Meditations on Divine Grace, writes of dreams in which a winged figure sits quietly beside the mourner, saying nothing, yet somehow conveying that the dead are not lost, only waiting beyond the edges of time. These theologians find him difficult to categorize. He does not fit the existing angelic schema. He is not a defender like Michael, nor a herald like Gabriel, nor a healer like Raphael. His power is less obvious, more profound. The ability to sustain hope when all earthly reason for hope has vanished. Jerome, laboring over translations in the dim solitude of his monastery cell, finds conflicting references. In some, Remiel appears as a judge of souls, in others, as their silent comforter. But eventually Jerome comes to understand what others struggle to see. These are not contradictions, but two sides of the same calling. Remiel offers justice that opens the door to mercy, and mercy that never loses sight of truth. In the parched wilderness where the desert fathers seek the divine in silence, many recount encounters with a figure they believe to be Remiel. He comes to them in moments of crisis, when spiritual thirst has become unbearable, when the silence seems not holy but empty. He does not lecture or perform signs. He simply sits with them, his presence a stillness deeper than solitude. Abba Macarius writes of the night he nearly abandoned his post, nearly fled back to the world he once renounced. As he prepared to leave, he sensed another presence in the shadows of his cell. The figure said nothing, but the air grew heavy with peace, and Macarius, without quite understanding why, unpacked his belongings and returned to prayer. I never saw his face, he wrote, but I felt as if I had been seen, as if my loneliness had been shared and thus lessened. Outside the monastery walls, among the ordinary faithful, Remiel begins to be invoked not as a bringer of miracles, but as a companion in suffering. A farmer, after watching his crops fail under an unrelenting sun, dreams of rain and green shoots. A merchant, robbed and ruined, stumbles into unexpected kindness that opens a new path. A mother, clutching the garment of a child she will never hold again, suddenly feels a presence in her sorrow, a warmth that assures her that love endures beyond breath. Remiel appears not in triumph, not at births or weddings or victories, but in the stillness after devastation. He comes when all is lost, when humans are stripped of illusions and standing on the edge of despair. He does not change their circumstances. Instead, he transforms their ability to carry them. His comfort is not the comfort of platitudes or easy hope. He offers no promises of escape. Instead, he brings the unshakable knowledge that pain is not meaningless, that struggle shapes the soul, that even in the night, mourning is inevitable. A young monk, Thomas of Celino, writes of Remiel as the angel who knows that hope is not the denial of sorrow, but the strength to live within it. He does not remove our burdens, Thomas wrote, but he teaches us how to carry them in a way that makes us more fully human. Over time, Remiel's name is spoken in peasant huts, in plague wards, on battlefields. His symbol, a single closed eye encircled by a halo of soft light, begins to appear above the doors of hospices and orphanages, etched into the walls of shelters, stitched into banners carried by those who walk into the darkest places bringing light. He becomes the patron of those who mourn, the unseen protector of the hopeless, the gentle sentinel for those who feel abandoned. Yet even as his influence spreads, Remiel himself remains elusive. He is not one to be summoned or worshipped. He appears only when needed, in forms that cannot be captured. His role continues, walking with souls in transition, not only between life and death, but through the smaller, daily thresholds, despair into courage, loneliness into connection, confusion into quiet trust. Through all these passages, Remiel remains what he has always been, faithful servant of divine love, archivist of memory, guardian of hope. Empires rise and fall. Languages are forgotten. Books decay, but his essence does not fade. He remembers what others forget. He sees what others overlook. He waits with endless patience until every wandering soul finds the path back to where they truly belong. And as the centuries continue, his name appears again, not only in dusty theological volumes, but in the apocalyptic dreams of prophets and mystics. In the visions of Second Esdras, Remiel emerges anew, named as Jerem, the one appointed to stand watch over the resurrection itself. In this future vision, his role expands once more, encompassing not just the living, not just the lost, but the moment when all the dead shall rise. And in that final hour, it is he who will call them forth. The text speaks of him not as a warrior or a scribe, but as something older, deeper, the angel who stirs the hearts of the faithful departed, calling them gently back to life with a voice that cuts through even the heaviest veil of death, a voice that slips past silence and time itself. In Ezra's mystical encounter, the prophet describes a being of unimaginable gentleness cloaked in immense, quiet power. Jerem, known also as Remiel, spreads his wings across the vast divide that separates earth from the heavens, yet his touch is so light it barely disturbs the morning dew. His voice carries the weight of divine authority, yet speaks with the tender clarity of a mother summoning her children home from their long journey. Tell me, O angel of the Lord, Ezra pleads in awe during his vision, what shall become of those who have died before the appointed final day? And Jerem does not answer with cold dogma or the intricacy of theological riddles, but with a calm, unwavering assurance. They rest, he says, as sleepers in quiet beds, guarded by angels who remember each name, who treasure every tear as if it were a pearl carved by sorrow and kept in heaven's vaults. In the apocalyptic visions of Beru, another late and hauntingly beautiful text, Remiel is shown in yet another role, not as a prosecutor wielding justice with iron severity, but as the reader of lives, the one who opens the great books at the hour of final reckoning with reverence and love. He does not seek out faults, nor linger over failings. Instead, he traces his fingers gently over the pages of human experience like a scholar discovering sacred truths in forgotten manuscripts. And as the court of heaven listens, he speaks with quiet fervor. See here, how this woman offered her bread to another though her own hunger gnawed at her bones. Look how this man chose forgiveness over vengeance, when revenge would have tasted sweeter. Witness the child who spoke the truth when lies would have kept her safe. In each testimony, he reveals the moments that shine, tiny flickers of grace, lost to most eyes, but never lost to him. The Ethiopian Book of Enoch, composed many generations after the original Enoch texts, names him Raguel or Raguel, the friend of God, charged with a task even more profound, ensuring that angelic beings themselves remain loyal to their divine callings. His authority does not stop at the boundaries of humanity. It stretches into the celestial spheres, holding even angels accountable to their sacred roles. In this vision, he walks among the seraphim and cherubim as a guardian of integrity. When the luminous ones stray from their paths, become proud or forgetful of their purpose, it is he who stands before them and whispers remembrance into their radiant hearts. The Slavonic Book of Enoch offers yet another glimpse. Here, Remiel is portrayed as the guide for the righteous dead, escorting souls through the multiple realms of heaven, gently revealing each mystery one layer at a time. Each soul must climb in their own way, he tells the prophet, some swiftly, prepared by lives of yearning and reflection, others slowly, needing to rest often and adjust their hearts to the growing light. But none will be forgotten. None will be left behind. My task is not to rush them, but to walk with them, step by step, into full understanding. These texts often struggle with naming him consistently. Sometimes he is Jeremiel, other times Raguel, occasionally Ramiel or Remiel. But this variation is not confusion, it is reverence. Like sunlight split through glass into many colors, his name changes with the angle of approach, reflecting the perspectives and needs of those who encounter him. In ancient monasteries, where tired scribes copied these texts by flickering lamplight, marginal notes occasionally appear. This is the one, writes a monk in the margin beside an illuminated R, who visited Brother Benedict as he lay dying. He said no words, but filled the room with such peace that the old man slipped into eternity as if into sleep. Islamic traditions, too, preserve glimpses of him, though under different names. They speak of an angel who bears the weight of the divine throne, whose stillness surpasses all motion, whose silence is deeper than oceans. His eyes are always closed, say some traditions, because he is lost forever in the vision of the Most High. The Gnostic texts, rich with mysticism and spiritual symbolism, portray Remiel as a revealer, not of forbidden knowledge like the fallen watchers, but of sacred memory. To the pure of heart and the seekers of truth, he appears and says, I am not here to teach what is new. I am here to awaken what has always been within you. Your soul remembers the light it came from. I am the whisper that helps it recall the way home. In the Testament of Solomon, a strange and magical late text concerned with power and protection, Remiel is assigned a role among the guardians against demonic forces. But unlike the warrior Michael, who fights with fire and sword, Remiel subdues with patience. He does not rage or conquer through force. He outlasts. He outloves. For it is not the loud demons that pose the greatest threat. It is those that whisper in shadows. Hope is a lie. Love is weakness. Goodness is a fool's prize. Against them, Remiel stands not as a soldier, but as proof. Proof that love is strength. That hope is not illusion, but the seed of redemption. That goodness, though often unrewarded by the world, echoes forever in eternity. Across all these writings, no matter the era or tradition, the patterns persist. Remiel is always the bridge, the threshold, the one who carries souls from confusion to clarity, from death to life, from fear to truth. He does not belong to one religion or one people, but to every soul that dares to believe that mercy is stronger than judgment. He is not loud, he is not common, but in the hush before transformation, in the breath between despair and resurrection, he is there. And though these later writings may never sit beside the canonized scrolls of Scripture, they hold something else: testimony. The shared recognition of countless hearts that in their darkest hour, when all light seemed lost and meaning drained away, someone had stayed with them, watching, waiting, loving. And in that eternal vigil, Remiel's story continues to unfold. The first Christian theologians approached references to Remiel with great care, for his quiet, shadowed role stood in contrast to more dominant angelic figures such as Michael or Gabriel. How, they asked, should this gentle yet firm angel, who acted not with trumpets but through stillness, be understood? How could they reconcile his function as both judge of the dead and a source of deep comfort for the living? Clement of Alexandria, writing in the 2nd century, offers one of the earliest meditations on this elusive being. He portrays Remiel as the very embodiment of how divine justice and mercy interweave, not as enemies, but as two hands working together in harmony. Just as a skilled physician may need to wound in order to heal, Clement observes, so too does Remiel judge not to inflict suffering, but to purify, not to sentence, but to restore. This interpretation resonated powerfully, shaping early Christian perspectives. They came to see in Remiel a vision of judgment that cleansed rather than condemned, a process meant to illuminate the soul rather than crush it under the weight of its past. Origen, the influential 3rd century thinker, pushed this line of thought even further in his controversial reflections on universal salvation. To him, Remiel represented the unwavering refusal of divine love to abandon any soul, no matter how deep its descent into despair. Even in the most hopeless darkness, Origen wrote, this angel stands vigil, planting seeds of return, proving with his presence that hope transcends even the shadow of death. These bold assertions sparked friction with institutional leaders who preferred doctrines of finality. Still, the vision of Remiel as compassionate and enduring proved too luminous to suppress entirely. John Chrysostom, preaching from Constantinople, embraced a more personal interpretation. He spoke of Remiel as the angel who comes not with answers, but with strength during times when faith feels foolish and prayer echoes into silence. Do not be surprised, he told his flock, if in your deepest doubts you sense someone near, offering no explanation, yet making the need for one vanish. That may be Remiel, who reminds us that doubt itself may be the doorway to deeper belief. Jerome, while wrestling with scriptural translations, faced inconsistencies in the angel's name. Sometimes Remiel, sometimes Raguel or Jeremiel. Ultimately, he opted to include Remiel not in the biblical text, but within his notes and margins. The truth of this angel, Jerome concluded, lies not in the name, but in the unchanging mercy of his character. Whether called by one name or another, Remiel stood for the truth that no soul is ever beyond mercy's reach. Even Augustine, at first skeptical due to his theological emphasis on human depravity and divine sovereignty, grew to revere Remiel. In a dream, he encountered the angel, silent yet utterly present, and understood in that moment a profound truth, that love most divine often arrives not as rescue but as endurance, not through spectacle but through the quiet capacity to carry on. The Cappadocian Fathers, Basil, Gregory of Nazianzus, and Gregory of Nyssa, offered further insight. They depicted Remiel as an emblem of spiritual development itself, a representation of the already but not yet reality of Christian hope. Gregory of Nyssa saw in him the patient companion for every soul's gradual transformation toward its divine destiny. The Desert Fathers, those mystics who retreated into the wilderness seeking God beyond the distractions of civilization, often wrote of Remiel as the angel of solitude, not punishment but purification, not exile but encounter. Abba Anthony called him the angel of the dry places, who teaches the soul to find water where none flows, and to see stars even in noon's blaze. Across all these testimonies, a picture forms. Remiel does not force change, he cultivates it. He does not dazzle with miracles, he anchors with presence. Above all, these early Christian thinkers saw in him a portrait of divine love not as a thunderous force, but as a gentle persistence, love that waits, that never gives up, that makes wholeness possible even when brokenness seems final. Through shifting doctrines and centuries of theological evolution, this core understanding of Remiel endured. He became not a relic of mythical origins but a living reality, a companion of the sorrowful, a guardian of process, a witness to redemption in the making. He remained the angel who stood at the crossroads of the soul's darkest nights, whispering truth not in thunder, but in memory and mercy. In his patient ministry, early theologians found an answer to the most haunting human questions. Why do we suffer? What becomes of those we've lost? Is there any meaning in enduring pain? Their answer, echoed through their veneration of Remiel, was clear: yes, because we are never alone. Someone is always watching. Someone always remembers. Someone is always waiting. And that someone, no matter how far we wander, never turns away. The great universities of medieval Europe transformed into thriving laboratories for the study of the celestial realm, becoming centers where scholars, equipped with Aristotelian logic and guided by the light of Christian revelation, endeavored to chart the invisible structures of the heavens with the same precision that their contemporaries used to trace the arcs of the stars. In this intricate and systematic pursuit of understanding the nature and function of angelic beings, Remiel emerged as a Thomas Aquinas, the towering theologian of the 13th century, encountered the question of Remiel while shaping his monumental theology of angels. With his hallmark intellectual rigor, Thomas examined where this quiet yet significant archangel might be situated within the already established celestial hierarchies. These hierarchies, derived from the writings of Pseudo-Dionysius and handed down through centuries, delineated 9 orders of angels organized into 3 primary tiers. The seraphim, cherubim, and thrones formed the uppermost level, burning closest to the presence of God with pure love. The middle tier included the dominions, virtues, and powers tasked with governing the cosmic balance, and the lower tier consisted of the principalities, archangels, and angels, those most intimately involved in human affairs. But where exactly did Remiel belong in this careful structure? His actions seemed to blur the boundaries between categories. He wielded authority over other angelic beings, hinting at a high rank, yet his deep involvement in the lives and transitions of human souls suggested a position much nearer to earth. He judged, yes, but his judgment was steeped in compassion. He comforted, certainly, but always in the light of truth, never in sentimental illusion. Ultimately, Aquinas placed Remiel within the order of archangels, though he carefully noted unique qualifications. This blessed spirit, Thomas wrote, appears to share traits with several ranks. Like the thrones, he reflects divine justice through contemplation. Like the virtues, he enacts miracles of endurance and consolation. And like the archangels, properly so named, he serves as an intermediary between heaven and earth. Aquinas proposed that perhaps Remiel's essence was a divine reminder that angelic hierarchies, while real, were not meant to be fixed boundaries, but rather flowing expressions of God's diverse and interconnected love. Albertus Magnus, Thomas's mentor, proposed a different perspective. He posited that Remiel might constitute a unique category among the angels, one whose primary purpose was to serve as a bridge across different realms of being. Most angels, Albert wrote, are specialists fulfilling roles within specific aspects of the divine order. But some are created to dwell in the spaces between. Remiel is such a one, an angel of the thresholds, a living connection uniting what appears otherwise separate: life and death, judgment and mercy, sorrow and hope. Medieval scholars also struggled with the issue of Remiel's name. The explosion of manuscripts, often copied by candlelight and prone to error, led to many textual variants and confused identities. In some sources he was called Jerem, in others Reuel or Rugel, and still others simply Ramiel. Bonaventure, the brilliant Franciscan thinker, offered an elegant explanation for these discrepancies. He proposed that the different names reflected not chaos but abundance, a multifaceted truth too rich to be captured by a single term. Names carry great significance, Bonaventure wrote, but there are realities that exceed even the greatest names. When we name him Remiel, we invoke compassion. When we call him Jerem, we invoke the awakening of souls. When we say Rugel, we speak of divine friendship. All these are true, yet none alone is sufficient. While theologians debated these complexities in scholastic circles, the ordinary faithful developed their own devotions. In churches dedicated to more prominent angels like Michael and Gabriel, side chapels began to appear honoring Remiel. These were often adorned with symbols of comfort and healing, an eye gently closed, a small flame in darkness, or protective wings arched around fragile human figures. Medieval artists struggled with how to represent an angel whose essence was not defined by warfare or annunciation but by presence and endurance. Unlike Michael's sword or Gabriel's lily, Remiel's defining attributes were internal patience, memory, and gentleness. In one remarkable fresco at the Abbey of St. Denis, Remiel is painted at the border of two rooms, one bathed in shadows, the other filled with radiant light. He extends his hand toward figures who step hesitantly from darkness into illumination. His expression is calm, his posture welcoming. In that moment, the artist captured something profound, the quiet courage of hope. Mystery plays, the popular religious dramas of the era, sometimes gave Remiel a role not in the main storylines, but in reflective interludes. In these performances, he would speak directly to the audience, offering meditations on pain, endurance, and the hidden work of divine love. In Wakefield's famous Passion play, Remiel appears between acts, addressing the souls of the faithful departed. "You who sleep in hope," the actor playing him would recite, "do not be troubled by the length of your waiting. Time flows differently where love is perfect. What seems like an eternity to those who grieve is but a breath to those who rest in God's embrace." Personal prayer books, known as Books of Hours, began to include prayers specifically addressed to Remiel. These devotions did not beg for dramatic miracles, but for strength and endurance. A typical prayer from this time reads, "Blessed Remiel, angel of patient love, be with us in seasons of waiting. When hope grows dim and faith falters, remind us that dawn always follows the longest night. Teach us to trust in God's purpose even when we cannot perceive it. Help us to comfort others as you have comforted us." The scholastic minds of the later medieval era, inheritors of centuries of faith and inquiry, turned their attention not just to affirming belief, but to probing it, carefully, reverently, and with precision. They began asking increasingly analytical questions about Remiel. What exactly did this angel know? Was his insight bound by time? Or could he, in some measure, foresee the future? Was his awareness broad enough to read the thoughts of humankind? And was his authority a fixed mandate from God, or did it flow with the shifting will of divine love? These were far from idle musings. They represented a sincere effort to reconcile theology with the structure of a coherent, God-ordained universe. John Duns Scotus, the brilliant Franciscan philosopher, offered one of the most enduring interpretations. He resisted labeling Remiel with omniscience, a trait reserved for God alone, and instead suggested something far more intricate: perfect memory. This angel, Scotus wrote with reverence, does not merely remember events as they unfolded, but also remembers what was divinely intended to unfold. He carries within him the original design, the sacred intention behind each created soul. And that remembrance, Scotus proposed, is what makes Remiel a beacon of hope. He does not recall our missteps or the record of failure. He recalls the truth of our design. William of Ockham, another luminary of the age, and a thinker known for his clear and measured approach, took a different path. He cautioned against the temptation to overanalyze angelic nature. The value of angels, he asserted, is not in our dissecting how they function, but in how their quiet workings serve the purposes of divine love. Let their mystery provoke reverence, not mere speculation. Across this landscape of thought, through painted frescoes on chapel walls, the chants of liturgies, the meditations of mystics, the treatises of learned theologians, and the whispered prayers of the fearful, Remiel remained what he had always quietly been, never a figure of spectacle or commanding force, but an enduring symbol of presence. An angel whose strength resided not in tempest or might, but in stillness, not in conquest, but in sacred memory, not in exaltation, but in faithful endurance. In an age heavy with plague, battered by war, and gripped by theological unrest, he came to represent not divine judgment, but divine patience. He became a soft and steady answer to humanity's enduring question: is there still hope? This unique medieval harmony between reason and devotion found, in Remiel, a luminous expression. The scholars gave language and framework to his purpose, while the mystics and the faithful gave witness to his reality. Together, they drew a portrait of an angel whose strength was not in dazzling displays or miraculous signs, but in the unbroken fidelity of divine love. By the time the medieval age began its slow descent into the shadows of change, Remiel had moved from obscurity to recognition, from forgotten name to sacred presence. He was no longer a vague figure on the margins, but a full embodiment of divine constancy, an angel of hope deferred but never denied, a bearer of mercy that softens the edge of judgment, a presence that speaks truth not in proclamation, but in the profound eloquence of silence, in the unseen corridors that stretch between life and resurrection, where the timeline of Earth begins to lose its grip and something eternal stirs in the quiet. Remiel keeps watch. His domain is not the place where Michael clashes with darkness in a blaze of glory, nor is it the throne room where Gabriel bears messages wrapped in radiance. Remiel tends a different space altogether, a sacred threshold where souls dwell not in verdict, but in grace. It is a place of rest, suspended in the long pause before redemption, where the soul is not judged but gently held. This sanctuary cannot be mapped. It knows no borders, no terrain. It has no walls, no archways. Its shape is mercy. Its architecture is compassion. It is a space woven from the very essence of divine patience, a resting place crafted not for punishment, but for restoration. Some have named it Sheol. Others call it the bosom of the fathers. But every human word fails to truly define it. It is not an ending, but an interlude, a still garden where healing begins. Remiel does not rule this place. He tends it. Like a gardener risen before dawn, he walks among the lives placed in his care. Each soul is to him not a file, not a task, but a living story. He remembers them, not just their sins or victories, but their potential, their beauty, their struggle. To each, he offers not instruction, but presence, peace without pressure, comfort without condition, hope without urgency. Newly arrived souls often carry confusion, clinging still to mortal expectations. They brace for judgment, for thunderous declarations, for the gavel of divine decree. Instead, they find silence, gentleness. A mother who lost her child to senseless violence may come bearing unbearable guilt, convinced she failed. Remiel doesn't correct her. He doesn't argue. He simply sits. And in his stillness, he permits her grief to exist, to breathe. He surrounds her with a presence so unwavering that she begins to understand. Her love, though it could not shield, was never wasted. It shaped eternity, a man bent by shame, who bartered principles for survival in a world gone dark, limps into the garden carrying a heavy silence. Remiel helps him see that surviving, though fraught, was not cowardice but an act of endurance. It left space for redemption. Children arrive, too, without the burden of regret, but heavy with the ache of unfinished life. Games never played, stories untold, loves unspoken, and Remiel, with a quiet grace, reveals to them a truth even they can feel, that what is truly loved is never lost. Even a brief life, if lived in love, can echo across forever. Here, in this resting place, there gather souls from every era. The ancient and the recently departed share the same space. Floodwalkers rest beside modern casualties, poets and farmers, kings and servants, prophets and skeptics. In this convergence, titles fall away. History loses its hierarchy. There is no rank, only presence, only heart. And Remiel, he is their bridge, their silent translator. A farmer from a forgotten land might sit in awe beside a scholar who once wielded volumes of sacred text, and the scholar might learn more from a lullaby sung by a mother who never held a pen. Truth flows differently here. It does not descend like a command. It grows quietly. It's nurtured. Remiel never preaches. He doesn't lecture or instruct. He cultivates. Sometimes that means letting a soul weep. Sometimes it means introducing another soul whose healing mirrors their own. And always, it means waiting, not for obedience, but for openness, for readiness. Some arrive with fists clenched in fury, anger at God, at loss, at the unfairness they carried to their death. They shout into the void, demand reasons, curse the silence. But Remiel never answers back. He does not correct or contest. He waits, because he understands that behind the anger is often an ancient wound. That defiance can be the voice of a soul still yearning to believe. In his waiting, he becomes an anchor. Through the storms of blame and bitterness, His presence never wavers. And when the fury finally fades, when grief finally surfaces, he begins his quiet work. He helps them see that pain, though sharp, is not the final word. That from brokenness, compassion can rise. That deep wounds can become the wells from which mercy flows. That confusion, even agony, can become a doorway to wonder. Through his ministry of presence, the very atmosphere of that sacred space shifts. Fear has no root. Despair cannot flourish. Instead, calm begins to settle. And where anguish once threatened to consume, the whisper of redemption begins to bloom. This is Remiel's miracle. Not thunder, not spectacle, but the slow, unwavering tending of hope in a sanctuary sown with the memory of love. Even the Archangel himself, through his long, enduring ministry, discovers something rare and profoundly precious. Every soul he accompanies, every spirit he tends, reveals to him another facet of the divine mystery woven into the human experience. With each encounter, each story entrusted to his care, Remiel's understanding stretches wider. He witnesses love revealing itself in countless forms, some familiar, others entirely new. What begins to move him most is the quiet heroism threaded through ordinary life. Not just the fire-bright acts of martyrdom or the high drama of sacrifice in battle, but the steadfast love of parents guiding their children through uncertainty and pain. The courage of simple people who, though bruised by sorrow, still choose kindness when bitterness would be easier, even justified. These humble choices, unseen by history, yet radiant in eternity, shape the angel's reverence for the human soul. In the waiting place, time flows according to rhythms unknown to the living. Some souls pass through as if drawn by light, ready and willing to move forward without delay. Others linger, wrapped in silence, gently unwinding the tangled threads of regret and memory, healing slowly. A few choose to stay longer, not because they are lost or afraid, but out of compassion for the newly arrived who benefit from their calm, rooted presence. And Remiel, faithful as ever, honors every path. He does not coax a soul forward, nor does he prevent a ready one from ascending. His gift is not in force, but in discernment, the ability to see precisely what each soul needs and to meet that need with perfect patience. For some, he offers challenge. For others, sanctuary. But for all, he provides a truth deeper than doctrine, that their existence, by simply being, is already of boundless value. And from this endless offering of himself, Remiel does not diminish. He expands. With every act of attentive presence, every moment of stillness that cradles another soul's pain or joy, his own spirit becomes more radiant. The love he gives does not drain, it overflows. The patience he extends becomes a source of awe, magnifying his own sense of wonder at the intricate unfolding of every life. His vigil is not an obligation. It is a choice, a calling. And within that quiet commitment lies his deepest joy. In this realm that stretches between death and resurrection, this sacred breath held before the final trumpet, love performs its most tender labor. And it is here, in this labor, that Remiel finds his truest aliveness. Through the ages, across cultures and epochs, mystics have spoken of visions, of a mysterious angel who does not arrive with fanfare or flame, but with stillness, like the hush that falls just before the dawn. Remiel is not seen in cataclysm, but in thresholds, the delicate moments suspended between sleeping and waking, despair and hope, grief and recognition. He is not armored. He does not thunder across dreams. Instead, he appears as a figure glimpsed at the very edge of awareness, cloaked in robes resembling the folds of twilight, eyes as deep and still as a moonlit lake, wings not poised for flight, but gently curved in shelter. In these visions, he walks softly through fields lit by no stars, where the air holds the fragrance of spring that never fades, beside rivers that rise instead of fall, as though prayers, long sent, are finally returning home. Saint Hildegard of Bingen described such a presence in one of her visions. She met the keeper of souls. He said nothing, and yet she understood. He led her through silent corridors where the dead slept as peacefully as children, each soul wrapped in radiant memory and deep peace. Later mystics echoed her testimony. They, too, were led through dreamlike valleys of gentle shadow, guided by a presence that neither demanded nor commanded, but filled every space with calm so complete it felt like eternity itself. He never rushed. He never pushed. His was the rhythm of the infinite. To many, he came to be known as the shepherd of the thresholds, the quiet guardian of all transitions. Where life bends into something beyond itself, where time loosens its hold, he stands watch. In dreams, his presence doesn't proclaim. It soothes. Many speak of an overwhelming sense of safety, like resting in the arms of someone who would never let them go. He carries no sword, no scroll. His hands, if seen at all, hold not objects, but the soft, sustaining glow of peace itself, like an ember that never dies. Some encounter him at crossroads within dreams, those symbolic spaces where crucial choices loom. He never speaks the decision. He never tells them what to do. He simply stands there, unwavering, a silent companion who, without words, assures them, "You are not alone." Others, lost in the grip of grief for loved ones departed, find him in the inner landscapes of sorrowful dreams. He offers no timelines, no predictions of reunion. He simply brings the one thing the soul craves most, an unshakable presence, whispering without sound that love, once true, can never die. Though his form may shift from vision to vision, certain images endure. His robes glisten like mist kissed by a hidden moon. His wings are not golden or pure white, but the soft gray of a dawn undecided. Where he walks, there is silence, but not the silence of emptiness. It is the living stillness of snowfall or the lull between waves, a soundless presence that speaks more than words ever could. Modern-day contemplatives and mystics continue to witness him. In deep prayer, in moments of surrender, or at the fragile edge of sleep, they feel him draw near. Not as a rescuer, not as a prophet, but as a companion. One who does not intrude or impose, but remains. That kind of stillness, they say, carries the message most needed. You are not forgotten. In these sacred moments, Remiel ceases to feel like a being and instead becomes a truth, living, enduring, and walking beside us, even in the most hidden shadows. He is also seen in collective dreams. Entire communities gathered in shared devotion sometimes report visions of a towering figure with dust-colored wings, gently overseeing circles of souls, not as ruler or judge, but as host. A welcoming force, a keeper of peace. In these dreams, he presides in liminal spaces, on beaches at low tide, in the doorways between ancient homes, in twilight forests where golden light sifts through the trees. The dreamers wake not with explanations, but with peace, not with answers, but with the deep reassurance that endings are not erasures. They are transitions, and that those who have passed are not lost, but held. Remiel's role has never been to explain the mysteries. He does not decode them. He bears witness to them. He delivers no edicts, offers no creed. He does not rescue, and he does not rule. He remains, and by remaining, by simply being, he creates the sacred space in which healing can begin. In a cosmos endlessly spinning, he is stillness. In a universe obsessed with beginnings and endings, he guards the middle, the sacred in-between. And when the final days draw near, his presence does not arrive cloaked in fury or spectacle. The end does not crash into creation with dread. Rather, it comes softly, like the unfolding of a tender realization. Sacred texts have long painted the culmination of time in grand strokes. Cosmic fires, apocalyptic battles, angels in brilliant descent shaking the bones of the world. And yet, within those roaring prophecies, there remain gentler verses, whispered hints of something more intimate, not destruction, but collection, a quiet, holy gathering. The Book of Enoch offers one such glimpse. As the dead rise in the great resurrection, someone must already know their names. Someone must have kept watch, held their memories, protected the love, the dreams, the small mercies that defined their lives. That someone, the one who waited, who witnessed, who remembered, was Remiel. Tradition often speaks of resurrection as a moment of great brilliance. Graves split open, trumpet blasts shaking the heavens, radiant light flooding the earth. But what if, before all that splendor, the first thing each soul hears is a voice? A familiar voice, calling their name in tones too soft to forget. What if, instead of a judge seated high upon a throne, they first encounter the quiet companion who walked beside them in silence? This, then, is Remiel's deepest purpose, the angel of memory, the soul shepherd who knows every story, the child who was taken too soon, the elder who bore both joy and grief in equal measure, the broken hearts who rarely knew rest. All of them, every one, awakens not to judgment, but to recognition, not to interrogation, but to welcome. Some theologians suggest that Remiel's role in the end is not limited to individuals. They imagine him as keeper of humanity's collective memory, the archivist of every generation's experience. And when the final day dawns, he does not carry ledgers of sin and virtue, but offers the great mosaic of human history. The full picture, tragic and beautiful, fractured and whole. A testimony that every life added something irreplaceable to the story of creation. Such a vision alters our understanding of judgment. No longer a courtroom where souls are weighed like currency. Instead, a great library, where Remiel, as the master librarian, lovingly recounts each person's narrative. He does not accuse or excuse, but reveals. See, he might say, how she gave her last piece of bread when she herself was starving. Look at how he forgave an unforgivable offense. Observe the child who chose truth, even when silence would have been safer. In Islamic eschatology, similar ideas echo around the angel Israfil, who will blow the trumpet of resurrection. But some mystical interpretations speak of a gentler figure, one who comes before the blast, whispering to the dead, preparing their souls for what's to come. The resemblance to Remiel is uncanny, a quiet presence, full of peace, standing watch as eternity stirs. In Eastern Orthodox traditions, prayers for the dead invoke nameless angels who comfort those who have passed. Though his name is not spoken, the function mirrors that of Remiel, guardian of the waiting, companion of the departed, bearer of peace in the silence before the return. Modern visions of the end tend to lean toward catastrophe, fire, collapse, cosmic ending. But through Remiel's lens, the end becomes less an ending and more a consummation, a great gathering in. The age does not simply collapse. It is harvested, and no part of it is discarded. Because Remiel is not merely the angel of endings. He is the angel of completion. His presence assures the fearful that no soul will be missed, that no life will go unloved. His voice, gentle and unshakable, will call out until every story is told. In some visions of Revelation, 7 mighty angels stand before the throne. Michael with his sword, Gabriel with his message, Raphael with his healing. But the ancient texts leave room, gaps where others might stand. Remiel is not named, yet his presence is felt in the spaces between. Perhaps he is the one who descends with the key to the abyss, whose quiet authority opens not just prisons, but the very hearts of those who waited too long. Perhaps he is the one who gathers the great harvest, not to separate, but to welcome, not to condemn, but to recognize. Scholars have wondered why his name fell from canon. Politics? Cultural confusion? Maybe the truth lies deeper still. Maybe Remiel's strength was never meant to be shouted, only known. He is the unnamed angel in Revelation's margins, the silent one in visions, the voice that calls each of us, not to fear the end, but to return home. The text itself speaks of truths sealed away, things not meant to be written, mysteries shown to the visionary but kept from record. Perhaps among those unspoken revelations is Remiel's role, hidden in the silence between verses. In the book of Revelation, an angel stands at the altar with a golden censer, mixing incense with the prayers of saints. This angel has no name, yet the function, serving as mediator between earth's longing and heaven's response, mirrors Remiel's nature, the bridge between realms, the unseen thread between mortal ache and divine compassion. Though later Christian traditions would expand their angelologies and number Remiel among the 7 archangels, the tension between biblical and apocryphal sources remained. Some resolved it by suggesting each text reveals a different facet of the same celestial reality, each name merely a glimpse through a prism of divine light. Gnostic traditions, dismissed as heretical by Orthodox churches, preserved names the canon omitted. Within their teachings, Remiel, or by some other name, appears as a being of memory and illumination, not bearer of forbidden knowledge, but guardian of truths the soul once knew and must remember. Eastern Orthodoxy, more open in its invocation of angels, often refrains from strict naming. In their liturgies, angels are called not by individual name but by role: messenger, protector, intercessor, allowing space for figures like Remiel to operate within the spiritual world even when left unnamed. His quiet presence endures, not bound by human record but felt in the moments between words, in the hush between rituals. The silence surrounding Remiel may be no oversight, but reflection of his very essence. He is the angel of those who are passed over, the unseen who continue faithfully from the periphery. In this way, the omission itself becomes testimony. He does not require official status to serve his purpose. He needs no title to fulfill his calling. He is remembered by those the world forgets, present for those whose names go unspoken. The unnamed angels in Revelation carry on his work, servants without fanfare, guardians without audience, holding together the pieces of a vast divine plan in ways too delicate for spectacle. In today's world, a world obsessed with followers, metrics, and visibility, Remiel offers a profoundly different vision. He embodies the sacred dignity of anonymity, the quiet strength of presence without praise. While many call on Michael for protection or Gabriel for direction, Remiel draws a different kind of soul, those whose pain hides in silence, whose stories remain uncelebrated. The elderly forgotten in quiet rooms, the unhoused passed over on sidewalks, the chronically ill enduring unseen battles, all find in him a divine companion who honors what others overlook. Even those outside religious frameworks are drawn to his story. Atheists who reject divine hierarchy still feel resonance in his archetype: the patient witness, the compassionate listener, the keeper of memory. His appeal is universal, not because he demands belief, but because he embodies a truth older than doctrine, that being seen and remembered matters. Support groups for the grieving speak of sensing a comforting presence. They speak of feeling watched over not by judgment, but by something warm, wordless, and enduring. These impressions mirror ancient understandings of Remiel as guardian of the departed, a presence more felt than known. In an age increasingly aware of mental health, Remiel's role has deepened. To the depressed, the lonely, the invisible, he becomes a symbol of divine tenderness, the angel who walks the shadows with them, never trying to force light, only to hold space until it returns. Even therapists, religious or not, acknowledge the healing power of being remembered. Remiel becomes a metaphor for the sacredness of witnessing, that our stories, even the quiet ones, even the unfinished ones, are worth keeping. Caregivers, teachers, nurses, and social workers, those who give deeply without acclaim, may find in Remiel a reflection of their own vocation. They too hold pain that isn't theirs. They too labor for others without stage or spotlight. They too are unseen and essential. In the noise of modernity, where content floods and memory fades fast, Remiel becomes the promise that someone keeps watch, that in the eternal archive, no soul is ever truly forgotten. Every whisper of courage, every act of unseen kindness, every broken heart that kept beating is remembered. The forgotten angel's most profound gift may lie in granting permission to cherish obscurity as a sacred discipline. In an age consumed by the chase for fame, influence, and measurable metrics of worth, he offers a radical alternative: the practice of quiet devotion, of being content to serve faithfully without recognition. Remiel's path is one of watchfulness, of silent presence, of offering the gift of attention without demand for acknowledgement. This path values the unseen labor, the unheralded acts of love, the quiet courage of being fully present in another's pain. Through the centuries, Christian art has returned again and again to icons like Michael, sword raised in triumph, or Gabriel, bringing annunciation in radiant glory. But Remiel remains elusive. He is not found in bold declarations of light, but in shadows and subtleties. Yet his essence still surfaces in sacred works: unnamed angels in illuminated manuscripts, serene figures in Byzantine panels ministering gently to the dead, their posture peaceful, their hands extended not in warning but in benediction. Their faces hold neither triumph nor mourning, but something deeper, the calm stillness of eternal remembrance. Renaissance artists, breaking from terror-infused depictions of death, offered gentle angels to accompany the dying, faces serene, hands extended in care. These tender portrayals align with Remiel's ancient role, not as executioner of divine will, but as a companion in crossing. Contemporary creators lean into his ambiguity. Abstract art evokes his presence with softened tones, shades of dusk, clouds at twilight, wings rendered in muted silver or charcoal blue. Textiles ripple with quiet presence. Digital media blends solidity and transparency, capturing the duality of his being, half seen, half felt. He appears not with the lion's roar, but as a quiet breath. His gaze, always downward or softly closed, holds the weight of memory. His wings often curve not to ascend, but to shelter. And it is in this shelter that his purpose manifests. Cemeteries now echo his nature. Sculptures of guardians keeping vigil not in grandeur, but in gentle resolve. Artists, unconstrained by doctrine, have turned to presence itself as the subject. Empty chairs that feel occupied, landscapes where something waits, spaces that feel watched over. These speak louder than any inscription. Remiel's scarcity in tradition is his power in the modern imagination. The quiet has given way to invitation, an opening for artists and mourners alike to imagine what it means to be remembered by someone divine. In the soft language of quilts and weavings, in environmental installations that ask for contemplation rather than impose it, Remiel's story is told. His memory work becomes a tactile thing, sensed rather than seen. Absence becomes medium, margins become home, and it is fitting, then, that this angel, guardian of thresholds and memory, should remain visually undefined. He resists containment. His strength lies not in spectacle, but in intimacy. He does not crash through heaven's gates. He waits by side doors. He does not thunder across history's pages. He lingers in footnotes. Artists must translate patience into brushstroke, memory into fiber, presence into light. And in doing so, they meet him, not with vision, but with recognition. Remiel is the librarian of existence, the archivist of the unnoticed. He remembers the unnoticed moments, the baby's first words spoken only to a mother who would forget, the aging father's final gaze at a sunlit window, the act of forgiveness that came years too late to change the outcome, but still carried its own quiet miracle. These are his sacred texts. Memory is identity, and in a world where memory, phrase, and history fails the ordinary, Remiel becomes the promise that nothing beautiful is ever lost. While historians track wars and rulers, he holds the deeper ledger, those who loved, those who hoped, those who chose kindness over bitterness. In him, no soul is erased, no tear is wasted. The smallest stories are cradled with as much care as the epics. For in the vast divine memory, every whisper matters. The dinosaurs that once thundered across the primal earth, the ancient titans of the steaming jungles, the soft petals of flowers that bloomed in prehistoric silence, and the stars that blazed and perished in galaxies light years away, long before any human eye ever turned toward the heavens. All of these are held within Remiel's immeasurable memory. His remembrance extends far beyond the narrow confines of recorded human history. It is not limited to the human tale. It encompasses the vast breadth of creation itself. His memory enfolds the unseen, the long-forgotten, the uncelebrated and undocumented, the quiet echoes of a universe endlessly unfolding, moment after moment. But this memory is no vast cold archive, no sterile vault of infinite data. It is not a machine-like recollection of events. Rather, Remiel's remembrance is sacred curation, tender, purposeful, and alive. He does not cling to the cruel words spoken in rage, but rather remembers the forgiveness that followed in its aftermath. He does not dwell on the sharp edge of despair, but on the fragile courage that rose, trembling, from within it. His memory reveres love, nourishes the seed of growth, honors connection, and sanctifies those unrecorded acts of grace, the silent moments when someone chooses gentleness over harm, care over indifference, mercy over retaliation. Within Jewish tradition, memory is not a passive act. It is a commandment, a holy responsibility passed down through centuries of exile, oppression, survival, and rebirth. The word remember repeats like a drumbeat across the Hebrew scriptures, appearing hundreds of times, echoing through the generations. In this spiritual landscape, Remiel finds his mirror. He is not merely a custodian of memories. He is the living embodiment of remembrance as sacred duty. In his being, forgetting becomes a kind of slow death, and to remember, truly, deeply, faithfully, is to breathe life back into the soul and its story. This sacred act of remembering becomes most powerful when it meets those who carry wounds too deep to name. For survivors of profound trauma, memory can become a tormentor, a fragmented mirror reflecting only pain. The joy they once knew slips through their grasp. The laughter is lost, the peace smothered by echoes of fear. Remiel offers a different kind of remembering, a memory that is gentle, healing, whole. He cradles what nourishes the soul, and in kindness, releases what harms it. Where human minds falter, forgetting what is needed, clinging to what should have passed, he remembers with clarity, with wholeness, and with love. In today's world, as conditions like Alzheimer's and dementia quietly unravel the minds of the aging, his role grows ever more luminous. Families watch in grief as loved ones seem to disappear behind veils of forgetting, as names and faces, stories and laughter slowly slip away. But even as these threads come undone in the human mind, Remiel holds fast. He carries the voice, the smile, the wisdom, the warmth, the entire soul, preserved in its entirety, even when the one who lived it can no longer hold it themselves. His memory reaches across the arc of time, through the rise and fall of civilizations, through ages of peace and chaos, through golden ages and forgotten wars, through revolutions of thought, faith, and consciousness. But he does not merely recall events. He remembers the meanings that lived inside them. He remembers not just the moments, but the truths, the ache that led to bravery, the tenderness that inspired sacrifice, the longing behind a choice. His memory expands rather than reduces. It weaves context into every action, soul into every fact. He does not simply remember what occurred, he understands why it mattered. And in this way, Remiel transforms information into wisdom. His memory is not static. It moves. It breathes. It teaches. Artists and poets, though they may never name him, reflect his calling. In their work, they bear witness. They resist forgetting. They preserve meaning. They make permanent what was fleeting. They testify that beauty, sorrow, wonder, and pain all deserve to be held and remembered. His remembrance flows forward as well as backward. He does not prophesy in riddles or read the future through omens. Instead, he remembers what has not yet happened, the delicate possibility of what could still be. He carries the memory of potential, the sacred vision of futures not yet born but fully possible. This makes him more than the angel of memory. It makes him the custodian of hope. For what else is hope, if not the soul's longing memory of goodness still to come? That is why libraries, museums, and archives feel like sacred spaces. These halls of knowledge and recollection, guarded by librarians, archivists, and curators, echo Remiel's mission. Though they may not know it, they serve him. Each photograph preserved, each diary archived, each letter saved, every name recorded. They are weaving memory into the fabric of time. These human keepers of memory become his earthly counterparts, caretakers of what should never be lost. When someone dies, those who remain often feel an aching fear that the details will slip away. The timbre of their voice, the way they laughed, the way their hands felt, warm and familiar. The memories blur at the edges, but Remiel is already there, holding, keeping, cradling every moment. Nothing is ever truly lost, for in his sacred memory, each story endures. The forgotten are not forgotten, not in the heart of the divine. And so when we speak of eternal rest, we must learn to see it differently. It is not silence, not absence, not the void. In Remiel's care, rest means to be held perfectly and remembered fully. No life is too small, no story too brief. Every being, no matter how quietly they pass through the world, finds their rightful place in the eternal weaving. In his remembrance, nothing worthy is ever discarded. Every soul fulfills its purpose, not as measured by fleeting time, but as it was always intended, eternally known. Beneath all this runs time, not time as we perceive it, ticking forward and away, but as a vast, mysterious river, flowing with depths we cannot see. Humans move along the surface, moment by moment, never able to go back, always drifting forward into the unknown. But Remiel moves beneath that current. He swims in the deep waters. For him, time is not a line. It is a wholeness, a continuum. He sees the birth of a child and the final breath of that child's old age in one loving, unbroken gaze. In his presence, time is not fractured. It is whole. This gives him a vision we cannot comprehend. He sees how one hidden act of kindness may ripple outward through generations, softening hearts that haven't yet been born. He knows how the dignity with which one soul bears their suffering might quietly ease another's pain long after their own death. Every decision, every intention, every gesture echoes. His memory is a living web of meaning, a testament to the sacred interdependence of all beings across all of time. It is this deep, timeless awareness that explains Remiel's relationship with prophecy. He does not predict. He perceives. He does not guess. He witnesses. Because he exists across time, he sees each moment, not as fragments, but as a unified melody already known by heart. And this knowledge does not swell him with pride. It humbles him, for he sees the sorrow before it arrives, and he must carry that sorrow long before the living ever feel it. He holds what has not yet happened. He bears the ache before the wound. Yet this is his great gift. Because he has seen the resurrection while others stare into death, he can stand beside the dying with quiet certainty. Because he knows the reunion when others feel only loss, he can hold the grieving in a silence that comforts more than words. Because he travels the river of time, he is never far. He is always already waiting at its end. Even prayer takes on new meaning in his presence. We cry out, not knowing if heaven hears. We offer our words in desperation. But to Remiel, every plea is already received, already held, not in delay, but in the eternal now. Each cry is absorbed into his memory, and though we wait for the answer, it already exists. This is the mystery of the angel who remembers all. He brings the end into the middle, the future into the present, and carries every soul gently through the unseen currents of time. The whisper beneath time does not form syllables or compose sentences. It does not speak in tongues known to human ears. Instead, it resonates on a frequency beyond sound, so subtle, so finely tuned, that it slips past the noisy mechanisms of waking thought. Most days, it goes unnoticed, buried beneath the rush of obligations and the chatter of the mind. Yet, in those rare and sacred pauses, when the world seems to fall still for just a breath, some souls have sensed it. Not a voice in any conventional sense, but an arrival, a sudden understanding not taught, a comfort with no obvious source, a hope that emerges, inexplicable yet undeniable. These moments are not accidents. They are slivers of Remiel's eternal presence slipping briefly into the folds of time. Throughout the long arc of human history, artists, mystics, and visionaries have attempted to capture these glimpses into a deeper dimension. They describe slipping beyond the measured tick of seconds and hours, entering a space where time either stretches like the horizon or contracts into a single, infinite pulse. In these rare encounters, a minute can cradle the weight of an entire lifetime, and an eternity can unfold within a single breath. These experiences suggest that, under the right conditions, the soul brushes against a realm untouched by clocks or calendars, a place where Remiel eternally dwells, ruled not by motion, but by stillness, not by deadlines, but by presence. This space beneath time reframes everything. For when one meets Remiel, it does not feel like a message has traveled down from some distant celestial throne. It feels instead like a veil has been lifted. A layer of reality, always present but overlooked, is suddenly revealed. His comfort does not fall from above like divine rain. It rises gently from within, like a remembered song or a dream you only now realize you've been having for years. He does not bring something new so much as awaken something ancient within you. In this way, Remiel is not a courier from beyond, but a revealer of what has been true all along. This quality, his rootedness in the eternal, makes him uniquely suited to those poised on the threshold of death. For inside the narrow framework of linear time, death looks like a cliff, a shutdown, a silent void. But from the vantage point of eternity, it is no such thing. It is not a disappearance, but a passage. Not an end, but a threshold crossed. A doorway from one form of being into another. Remiel walks with those who stand there. He helps loosen the grip of time-bound identity, gently guiding the soul to see itself anew, unfolded, expanded, no longer shackled by the illusion of finality. The whisper that moves beneath time does not use words. It does not offer explanations or instructions. Instead, it arrives as pure recognition, a shift in consciousness so complete that the soul no longer needs to ask anything. Those who have touched this whisper speak of a stillness that saturates every corner of their being, a peace that quiets even the deepest questions, a calm knowing that all things are held, all things are seen, and somehow, all things are already well. Remarkably, even the language of science hints at such mystery. Quantum physics, particularly the phenomenon of non-locality, reveals that particles can remain connected across vast expanses, responding to each other instantaneously, regardless of distance. Perhaps, in poetic metaphor, this mirrors Remiel's work. His presence, like those particles, defies spatial logic. He reaches across centuries, connecting souls as though they breathe side by side, as though time never separated them at all. The whisper beneath time, the hum of Remiel's presence, invites us to step back from the frantic chase of goals and deadlines. It reminds us, gently but firmly, that the things we deem urgent, status, speed, success, are often nothing more than ripples on the surface. Beneath them flows the real current, slow, deep, eternal. This isn't to dismiss the value of daily life, but to reposition it within a context vast enough to hold every moment, every heartbeat, in grace. With this shift in understanding comes a quiet revolution in how we encounter grief. Loss no longer arrives as severance. It is seen, instead, as change in the form of a bond. In Remiel's realm, love belongs to eternity. It is not broken by death. It simply changes shape. Like a river flowing unseen beneath winter ice, love continues, even when invisible. Presence persists. Connection endures. What is truly precious cannot be erased. And then, there is you. In the silence that follows heartbreak, in the moment between breath and action, in the gentle stillness that settles after noise fades, something ancient awakens in your soul. It is not dramatic. It is not loud. It is a quiet, wordless yearning. A longing to be known beyond what you can explain. A desire to be assured that your story matters, even if no one else sees it. That longing itself becomes a call, and Remiel answers. Not with spectacle, not with signs or voices in the sky, but with presence, with the quiet certainty of being seen. You don't need sacred rituals or theological training to meet him. You don't have to recite prayers with precision or light the correct candle. Your connection to this forgotten angel begins with something simpler. The deep recognition that your life carries meaning, that your burdens are real, that your efforts to keep going, to breathe, to hope, to care, are not small, even if they seem invisible. Remiel is the custodian of unnoticed moments. The breath you draw alone on a cold morning. The sudden memory of someone you lost long ago. The tiny flicker of light that returns after your darkest night. He dwells in those places where no one else thinks to look. He does not meet you on the mountaintops of spiritual triumph, but in the shadowed corners of ordinary life. Where it is quiet, where it is real. You don't have to believe in angels to feel him. He doesn't wait for permission. He doesn't respond to creed, but to ache. The moment you wonder if your grief means anything, if your tears are seen, if your story will matter when you are gone, that is when he draws near. He sees the pain you've hidden, the memories you revisit, the fears that keep you awake. And he does not rush to change them. He simply holds them, because they are sacred. He knows what it feels like to be forgotten. Remiel, too, was left out, ignored by sacred texts, bypassed in liturgies, unnamed in the canon of angels more glamorous or mighty. But he kept watch. He stayed faithful, even in silence. And that obscurity, far from making him distant, has made him intimate. He is especially near to those who feel invisible, uncounted, uncelebrated. He treasures what you treasure. not just milestones, but details. The smell of your childhood blanket, the slant of sunlight on your bedroom wall, the sound of your mother's voice singing in another room. These are not meaningless. These are holy. They are fragments of eternity, and in His care, they are preserved. His presence does not end with your final breath. It surrounds your entire journey from your first heartbeat to whatever awaits when this chapter closes. He has seen you complete, even when you've only known yourself in fragments. And so He understands, deeply, that even your suffering is part of something unfolding, something larger, something sacred that has not yet shown its shape. And when you reach for others in forgotten places, when you visit someone sick, or sit quietly beside a grieving friend, or offer comfort with no answers, you are walking in step with Remiel. Your stillness becomes His stillness. Your kindness becomes the vessel through which His presence enters the world. He does not disrupt the story of your life. He inhabits it. He moves quietly through its chapters, making space for love to grow even in pages of sorrow. His whisper beneath time is the melody of eternal remembering, a soft, steady refrain that assures you, even when the world moves too fast to notice, someone always does.